They told you anxiety means something is wrong with you, that it's weakness, that you just need to calm down or think positive and everything will be fine. But if that were true, why does the overthinking still come at night? Why does your chest still tighten when there's no danger? Why does your mind keep spinning even when the world is quiet? The truth is, anxiety doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're alive. It means your mind is trying to protect you, but in doing so, it's keeping you from peace. Real peace doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from letting go. And that's where Buddhist wisdom comes in. For over 2,500 years, the teachings of the Buddha have shown people how to face fear without running, how to breathe through panic without hiding, how to live gently, even when the mind is loud. This isn't about escaping anxiety. It's about understanding it so deeply that it begins to dissolve. Tonight, as you listen, something will shift. Your shoulders will soften. Your breath will deepen. The storm in your chest will begin to pass. You'll feel a quiet presence within you, the kind that doesn't argue with the mind, but embraces it with stillness. This isn't just a sleep aid. This is your path to freedom. Are you ready to feel safe again? Let's begin. You've been searching for a way out of the storm, but maybe the real path isn't out at all. Maybe it's in. Beneath the surface, deeper than the thoughts, deeper than the tension. Not a trick, not a distraction, but a return. There's a space so quiet, so still, that anxiety can't follow you there. Tonight, that's where we're going. Not to escape, but to remember something the noise made you forget. Your peace was never gone. It was just waiting underneath the noise. Let's begin with the breath. Not the breath you use to get through the day, not the shallow breath that comes and goes without attention, but the breath beneath the breath, the current that's been flowing through you all along, silent, patient, and untouched by panic. Most people never find it because they're trying too hard to breathe their way out of anxiety. But Buddhist wisdom doesn't teach you to fight the tide. It teaches you to float. And that starts with awareness, not of the breath's movement, but of the awareness itself that notices it. That's what the Buddha pointed to with anapanasati, the practice of mindfulness of breathing, but not in the way it's often rushed through in modern apps or simplified meditation guides. This goes deeper. Start with the body. When anxiety is high, the breath becomes small. It shrinks into the chest. It races. It climbs. And yet, even then, there is a quieter breath below it, deeper in the belly, slower, softer, like the roots of a tree beneath a shaking wind. The breath in the chest is your reaction. The breath in the belly is your return. Buddhist monks often place one hand on the abdomen and simply feel the natural rise and fall, not controlling it, just watching. Why? Because that lower breath isn't manipulated by fear. It doesn't care about deadlines or social pressure. It follows the ancient rhythm of life itself. When you bring your awareness down into it, even just for a moment, something shifts. It's like your nervous system recognizes its true tempo again. No force, no effort, just presence. But we go even deeper, not just to the breath in the belly, but to the awareness that notices the breath. That's the real key. In Anapanasati, the Buddha didn't say just to watch the breath. He said to be aware of the entire body breathing, and then to be aware of the mind watching. It's not about focusing so hard that you forget everything else. It's about loosening the grip on thought by resting in the observer behind it. That's the breath beneath the breath, not just the air, but the space around it. That space doesn't judge, it doesn't resist, it just sees. And what it sees, it softens. Anxiety thrives in the tightness between moments, in the mind trying to predict, fix, prepare. But what happens when you shift attention to the gaps instead of the grasping? Try noticing the stillness at the end of the exhale. That pause, that empty moment before the next breath begins. That's the doorway. That space is not anxious. That space holds no fear. And the more you touch it, the more familiar it becomes. You start to realize that anxiety is just a surface wave, but underneath, there's an ocean that never stopped being calm. In Buddhist monasteries, monks are taught to walk slowly, breathe slowly, speak slowly, not to become sluggish, but to match the inner rhythm of peace, to retrain the nervous system to stop dancing to the tune of panic. This isn't laziness, it's precision. It's remembering that the breath can be your anchor, not by controlling it, but by trusting it. That's something most people never learn. They try to breathe away anxiety by inhaling deeper, forcing calm. But the more you try to force stillness, the more it runs away. The real stillness is already there. You just have to meet it where it lives. Think of it this way. Most of your day, your attention is riding on thought, on words, on stories. What if you shifted it down, like stepping out of a noisy room into a quiet forest? The breath beneath the breath is like that forest. No opinion, no judgment, just space, just movement, just now. And anxiety, as loud as it is, cannot live in pure now. It needs time to survive. It needs a future to fear, a past to regret. But the breath doesn't live in either. It's always present. And presence is anxiety's antidote. When the Buddha instructed his monks on breathing, he didn't tell them to imagine peace. He told them to feel each breath fully, long, short, deep, shallow, and then to notice how the mind responded. He didn't say to silence the mind. He said to understand it. And as understanding grows, panic weakens. Not through suppression, but through clarity. Because when you see clearly, you stop fighting. And when you stop fighting, peace enters. Not like a flood, but like a gentle light seeping through the cracks. That's what this is. Light through the cracks of tension, of tiredness, of trying to keep it all together. What if there's nothing to keep? What if the breath knows exactly what to do without you managing it? Right now, your body is breathing without your help. That's not a failure. That's proof of trust. And the more you trust it, the more you realize that the part of you always trying to solve is the part that's most tired. That part doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to rest. In the stillness of night, the mind gets louder. That's why this practice matters. Not to numb yourself, not to escape, but to come home. Anxiety will say, "What if?" Peace replies, "This breath." Anxiety wants explanation. Peace offers experience. And every time you choose to feel the breath without chasing the thought, you step closer to freedom. Not in some dramatic awakening, but in the simple act of sitting, breathing, and watching without resistance. The breath beneath the breath has no story. It doesn't care who said what. It doesn't care what happens tomorrow. It's just here, with you, quietly saying, stay. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to do anything to be worthy of peace. You just have to stop running from it. And that starts by feeling what's already here. The breath in the belly, the space around the inhale, the pause after the exhale. That's where you live. That's where you're real. Anapanasati, in its deeper forms, reveals that the breath is not just a bridge to calm, it's a mirror. It shows you where you're tight, where you're pushing, where you're trying too hard. And in that awareness, you can soften. You can relax the control. You can let each breath be enough. That's the teaching. Each breath is enough. You don't need to fix every thought. You just need to breathe with it, under it, beyond it. That shift is small, but it changes everything. Because when you stop fighting the breath, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, anxiety has nowhere left to live. So now, as your eyes get heavy and the thoughts begin to slow, stay with the breath. Not the breath you push, not the breath you measure, but the breath that breathes itself. The one below your worry, the one beneath the thinking. Stay there. Let it carry you. Let it hold you. Let it remind you of the peace that was never gone, only hidden. And as that quiet begins to rise like warmth from deep earth, you'll notice something else. You're not trying anymore. You're just being. And in that, you're finally free. Now let's keep going. There's more to release, more to uncover, because the bowl has been full for too long, even after the breath has slowed, even after the body has softened. There's one more place where anxiety hides, inside the need to keep thinking. The breath may be calm, but the mind still stirs. It whispers questions that don't need answers, pokes at problems already solved, and loops you back into worries just when you thought you were free. That's the trap, not of fear itself, but of too much. Too many thoughts, too many attempts to fix what isn't broken. And in Buddhism, there's a word for what breaks that cycle: santuti, contentment, the wisdom of knowing when enough is enough. An anxious mind doesn't stop because it finds the perfect solution. It stops when it's given permission to stop. But no one ever taught us that. We were told to keep digging, keep questioning, keep solving. That more clarity would bring peace. That more information would finally close the loop. But the truth is, most of the time, more just means heavier. A bowl that's already full doesn't get better with more water. It spills. And that overflow is exactly what overthinking feels like. A life poured too far past enough. So, what do we do when the bowl is full? The answer isn't to smash the bowl or criticize it for not being bigger. It's to stop pouring. And that takes practice. In Buddhist teachings, contentment isn't laziness, it's intelligence. It's the deep recognition that peace doesn't come from squeezing every drop of certainty out of a situation. It comes from learning to rest while things are still unresolved. The world will always give you more to think about, but you don't have to take every thought it hands you. There's a story often told in Theravada tradition about a monk who kept a small, cracked bowl. Every morning, he would fill it with water, but never to the top, just enough to cleanse his face and hands. When a novice asked why he didn't fill it all the way, the monk replied, "When the bowl is full, even one drop makes it overflow. But if I leave space, I leave room for stillness." That's santuti, not the absence of need, but the presence of wisdom. Anxiety tries to convince us that just one more thought will solve everything, that if we analyze just a bit longer, we'll feel safe. But thought isn't bad, it's just not the answer to every question. The Buddha taught that craving comes in many forms, not just for possessions or pleasure, but for certainty, for resolution, for closure. And mental craving is one of the most exhausting kinds. It wears down the nervous system like a river grinding against stone. But there's a different way, not to shut the thoughts down, but to stop feeding them. Next time you notice yourself spiraling, ask, what would happen if I didn't finish this thought? Not stopped it, just didn't finish it. Let it hang, let it fade. That's the essence of just enough. The mind doesn't need a conclusion, it needs rest. And rest doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from releasing the belief that you need to keep going. Buddhist psychology refers to this as the end of grasping. The moment when you no longer cling to every mental thread. And in that unclenching, clarity rises, not from tension, but from space. Have you ever noticed that your best ideas come not when you're trying, but when you're walking, showering, resting? That's not a fluke. That's the mind, unburdened. Thought without pressure. It flows when it's allowed to breathe. But we've been trained to chase closure like it's oxygen. To think that peace means solving everything. The irony? The more you chase it, the faster it runs. Contentment turns the chase into a pause. And in that pause, the heart opens. It stops demanding perfect answers and starts accepting peaceful moments. Even if the to-do list isn't done, even if the conversation didn't go right, even if the future still feels uncertain. Santuti is not passive. It's a choice, a boundary, a quiet refusal to overload your own mind. Just like a skilled cook knows when to stop seasoning, a wise person knows when to stop thinking. That moment when the mind whispers, "Keep going," and you answer, "No, this is enough." That's when power begins. The power of presence. The power of internal peace that isn't based on external conditions. There's a silent courage in stopping. Most people won't understand it. They'll say, you're avoiding, that you're giving up. But the truth is, stopping when the bowl is full is harder than pouring more. It takes awareness. It takes self-trust. To stop trying to mentally rehearse every possible outcome. To stop editing the past. To stop building castles of what if in a sky that hasn't yet opened. That's not giving up. That's waking up. When Buddhist monks finish their chanting or meditation, they don't rush to reflect on how it went. They bow, they close, they leave space. That ritual of completion matters. It teaches the nervous system to rest. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is held with enough attention already. So, what if you adopted that? Not as a dramatic gesture, but as a daily practice. To let a conversation be enough. To let a meal be enough. To let a moment of silence after an anxious thought be enough. You don't need to do everything. You don't need to fix every emotional ripple. Sometimes, all that's needed is to sit by the edge of your own mind and stop throwing in stones. Let the water settle. Let the bowl stay as it is, not empty. not overflowing, just full enough to hold peace. When the Buddha spoke of the middle way, this was part of it, the path between indulgence and deprivation, between obsession and avoidance. Overthinking is indulgence in thought. Shutting down is deprivation. But awareness that says, this much is enough, lives in the middle. It allows space without collapsing into chaos. It welcomes thought without drowning in it. Try this. The next time you feel overwhelmed, instead of asking, how do I fix this? Ask, how much of this do I really need to carry right now? Most of the time, the answer is less than we think. The rest is weight we picked up out of habit. The anxious brain is like a collector, always picking up pieces of fear just in case. But when you stop collecting, when you begin releasing, you realize something vital. Peace was never about control. It was always about knowing when to stop. There's a line in the Dhammapada that says, contentment is the greatest wealth. Think about that. Greater than success, greater than knowledge. Because contentment lets you sleep at night. It lets you breathe in traffic. It lets you sit with someone in silence and feel no need to perform. That's the kind of wealth anxiety can't buy. And it starts by noticing when your inner bowl is full and honoring that fullness. The modern world says more is better. More productivity, more answers, more stimulation. But Buddhism whispers something different. That less can be deeper. That silence can speak. That simplicity isn't lack, it's clarity. And anxiety, it doesn't thrive in clarity, it thrives in clutter. So clean the bowl, not with force, with space, with stopping. This isn't easy, especially when you've lived your whole life believing you have to earn your right to relax. But Santuti doesn't ask for proof, it just asks for presence, for the willingness to say, this is enough for now. Not forever, just now. And in that now, you're allowed to rest. So if your mind is still spinning, that's okay. Don't fight it. Don't try to silence it. Just stop pouring. Let the thoughts settle on their own, like dust in still air. They always do. And in that stillness, you may feel something strange. Lightness, space, a mind that isn't desperate to fill every moment, a heart that beats without demand. That's the peace you've been chasing. And it was here, waiting, right beneath the overflow. Now take one more breath, and let it be the last thing you need for now. Not because you finished the thought, but because you don't need to. Not anymore. There's a freedom in that. Even when we learn to stop pouring into a full bowl, even when the breath slows and contentment is tasted, there's often still something underneath, something harder to name. A tightness, a shadow that doesn't speak loudly, but follows quietly. It's not the anxiety that screams, it's the one that whispers, the one that pretends it's helping, the one that shows up as the need to manage everything, the fear of not knowing, the craving to stay in control. This is the anxiety that doesn't look like panic. It looks like planning. It looks like perfectionism. It looks like trying to predict the future so thoroughly that nothing can go wrong. But behind all of it is fear. And that fear is terrified of being seen, because if it's seen, it might have to let go, and letting go feels like falling. In Buddhism, there's a word for this kind of grasping: tanha, craving. Most people think craving is just about desire, wanting things, chasing pleasure. But one of the most overlooked kinds of craving is the craving for control, the craving for certainty, the craving for safety in a world that refuses to promise it. And that craving is a root cause of anxiety. Not because craving makes us weak, but because it makes us cling to the illusion that we can outthink the unknown. The mind learns early that controlling leads to reward. Plan well, succeed, predict correctly, avoid pain. But somewhere along the way, this smart habit mutates into a prison. The mind starts trying to control things it can't. The mood of others, the twists of fate, the random movements of life. And every time it fails, the fear grows. Not because the danger is real, but because the illusion cracks. And nothing terrifies craving more than losing its illusion. But here's the truth. Fear isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. And the craving for control? It's not a flaw. It's a misunderstanding, a misreading of what peace requires. The anxious mind believes it must do something to be safe, but Buddhist practice invites us to see through that illusion, not by force, not by logic, but by awareness. Because once you see the craving clearly, without judgment, it starts to loosen. Not all at once, but gradually, like sunlight warming ice. Mindful awareness doesn't mean analyzing your fear. It means feeling it directly without collapsing into it. Sitting beside it like a calm friend, not a frantic fixer. When tanha arises, the practice isn't to make it go away. It's to recognize it. Ah, this is craving. This is the mind trying to reach for control again. You label it gently. You breathe with it. You don't fight it. You just see it. And in that seeing, it begins to lose power. This is one of the great paradoxes of Buddhist insight. The more clearly you see a mind state, the less control it has over you. Not because you've defeated it, but because you've stopped identifying with it. Anxiety says, "Fix this now, or something terrible will happen." Awareness says, "This is anxiety speaking. Let it pass." You don't deny it. You just stop feeding it. But this takes practice, because fear is clever. It disguises itself as logic. It wraps itself in productivity. It hides behind the mask of responsibility. You may find yourself rehearsing conversations in your head, micromanaging every detail, analyzing the past like it's a puzzle that holds a secret code. And you tell yourself, "I'm just being careful." But careful becomes compulsive, and the line between preparation and panic gets blurry. So what's the turning point? It's when you realize that control is not the path to peace. Presence is. And you begin to shift your attention, not to the content of the thoughts, but to their source. The craving, the tension in the body, the tight breath, the inner pushing. You soften there. You feel the grip. And without needing to let go, you notice that it begins to release on its own. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped running. The Buddha taught that clinging leads to suffering. But he didn't mean just clinging to pleasure. He meant clinging to anything as a requirement for happiness, including control. And once you start seeing that your anxiety is often a craving for control, you realize you've been carrying a burden that was never yours, the burden of keeping life inside a box. But life was never meant to fit. There's a practice some monks do when anxiety arises. They don't chant or distract. They pause, and they mentally say, "Not mine, not me, not who I am." This is not denial. This is a way of loosening identity. The fear is present, but it doesn't define them. The craving to control is there, but it doesn't own them. This is the beginning of freedom. Let's say you feel anxious about the future. A big decision, a relationship, a health scare. The craving for control kicks in. The mind wants answers, certainty, but none are available. So what do? You bring awareness back to this moment, to the breath, to the feet on the floor, to the sounds around you. You let the craving arise, and instead of trying to satisfy it, you watch it. You say silently, "I see you," and that's all. No fixing, no suppression, just space. Over time, this space becomes your refuge, because in that space, craving has nothing to hold on to. It dissolves, and underneath it, there's something more honest, a quiet trust, not in outcomes, but in your ability to stay with yourself, no matter what comes. Because that's what anxiety truly fears, being left alone in uncertainty. But if you can learn to stay with yourself, the fear no longer has to run. It can rest because you're not leaving, you're here, you're breathing, you're present, and that presence is stronger than any false sense of control. This doesn't mean you stop planning or caring. It means your actions come from peace, not panic. You still take care of what matters, but you're not held hostage by the need to guarantee results. You live, you choose, you move through life, but the grip softens. The craving loses its hold. And when you do feel the craving rise again, and you will, you greet it like an old friend. You say, the mind is scared again. That's okay. You don't resist, you don't obey, you just witness. And in that witnessing, you become bigger than the fear. Because fear that is seen stops hiding, and fear that stops hiding stops growing. And so the craving that once tried to protect you by controlling everything finally learns. You don't need control to feel safe. You need presence. You need compassion. You need the courage to stay with what is without trying to rewrite it. And the next time the fear starts to rise, you'll remember you've already walked through it. You didn't fix it. You didn't outthink it. You just stayed. And that was enough. The fear that tried to protect you by controlling everything wasn't the enemy. It was the surface of something deeper, something more tightly held. Beneath the craving to manage life, beneath the anxious push to fix every detail, there's something more central, the one who's doing all the holding. The inner voice whispering, "It's all on me." That weight doesn't just come from the situation. It comes from the idea of you, the self, who must carry it, solve it, be responsible for it. And in Buddhism, there's a word that gently unravels this illusion. Anatta, non-self. Not no identity, not nothingness, but a soft, radical truth. That the self you think you are, the one trying to hold it all together, isn't as solid as it seems. And that idea, that illusion, is often what anxiety is clinging to most. The belief that there's a central, separate you who must stay strong, who must figure it all out, who must never fall apart. But what if that self wasn't fixed? What if it wasn't yours to protect? Anxiety is heavy because it builds on the assumption of a self that's in danger, a self that could fail, a self that must do more, be more, get everything just right. But the Buddhist teaching of non-self doesn't try to erase you. It helps you see through the parts that aren't truly you, the mental constructions, the labels, the pressure points where you identify too tightly with the mind's version of you. There's a common metaphor in Buddhist tradition, the raindrop and the ocean. A raindrop falls, separate, complete, seemingly alone, but the moment it touches the ocean, it isn't destroyed. It becomes vast. It loses nothing of its essence, but gains something immeasurable. This is what it's like when the self dissolves into awareness, when the anxious identity that says, "I have to keep everything together," finally relaxes into something bigger, something that's been holding it all along. Right now, you might feel like a self with a problem, a self with too many thoughts, a self under pressure. But what if what's real isn't the self, but the awareness that's watching it? That's where the shift begins. When you move from being the thinker to being the space that sees the thoughts. When you stop trying to fix the self and start resting in what holds the self. Spacious awareness. This awareness doesn't have a story. It doesn't panic. It doesn't identify. It just sees. It sees the fear, the craving, the tension, and it doesn't flinch, because it's not a person. It's not a role. It's not a voice in your head. It's the silence underneath all of that, the space that lets everything arise without becoming anything itself. That's who you truly are, not the anxious voice, but the open field behind it. But that voice is convincing. It tells you, if you let go of the self, everything will fall apart. It says, this identity is all you have. It clings because it believes that holding tighter will prevent pain. But it's the holding that creates the suffering. The grip is the tension. And non-self doesn't mean giving up. It means loosening that grip. Seeing that the one doing the grasping is made of thoughts, not stone. Try this. Close your eyes and listen for the next thought. Don't judge it. Just watch it come. Then ask, who noticed that thought? Don't answer too fast. Just rest in the question. Let it open something. The one who noticed isn't a character. It's not a voice. It doesn't have an opinion. It's just aware, silent, free. That's what the Buddha pointed to, not as a theory, but as a direct experience. When awareness becomes the center, the self can dissolve. And with it, anxiety changes, because anxiety needs a self to anchor into. It needs a character to scare. But when the self is seen through, the fear has nowhere to land. It may still arise, but it floats like a cloud with no sky to cling to. And that's the freedom. Not that fear disappears, but that it can't hold you anymore. There's a teaching in the Pali Canon where the Buddha says, just as a skilled butcher cuts away the skin from the flesh, so too does one with insight separate awareness from identity. This isn't violence, it's clarity. It's the gentle art of disidentifying with the roles, the names, the inner drama, of realizing this tension isn't mine, this fear isn't who I am. And in that space, what's left is peace. Not because you found it, but because you stopped mistaking yourself for the one who needed to. Many monks train in this by sitting for hours, not to escape, but to observe the flickering of the self, how it appears, how it clings, how it dissolves. And over time, they learn to trust the ocean more than the raindrop. Not as an idea, but as a living experience. They stop defending the self and start relaxing into presence, and with that, anxiety weakens. Not because they're stronger, but because there's less self for the fear to attach to. The irony is that letting go of the self feels like the end of control, but it's actually the beginning of real safety. Because the separate self is always vulnerable, always one comment away from shame, one outcome away from collapse. But awareness, it cannot be harmed, it cannot be insulted, it cannot be broken, because it was never a person to begin with. It's just space, infinite, gentle, unshakable. And that's what you return to every time you stop clinging, every time you let the thought pass, every time you rest in the watcher, not the worrier. You become the ocean again, and the raindrop was never lost. It just didn't know how vast it already was. So what does this mean in everyday life? It means when anxiety flares, you don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" You ask, "Who is this me that fear is speaking to?" You notice the thought, but you don't become it. You hear the panic, but you don't follow it. You feel the contraction, but you return to the space that surrounds it. That space is your truth. The self is just the mask, a beautiful one, a fragile one, but not the source of your being. And every time you remember that, you take one more step out of the prison of identification, one more step into the quiet freedom of being. Because the most healing realization isn't that anxiety is wrong, it's that you're not the one it's clinging to. So let the anxious self soften, let the story unwind, let the you that's always bracing begin to float. You don't need to hold it all together. You were never meant to, because nothing real can fall apart, and nothing false needs to be held. Breathe here, and feel the self dissolve, not into emptiness, but into something more loving, more open, more vast than fear could ever reach. You're not the noise, you're the space it echoes in. And now that the self is no longer the center, let's explore what else can soften. Because when the eyes relax, the mind follows. Once the grip of the anxious self begins to loosen, something unexpected starts to happen. Tension that had no name begins to release. Not just in thought, not just in emotion, but in the body, in the senses, in the way the world is seen. Because the anxious self doesn't only live in your story, it hides in how you hold your face, how your shoulders sit, how your eyes scan the room for threats that aren't even there. Long after the fear has left, the body still waits for it to return. And one of the first places this waiting shows up is in the eyes. In Buddhist monastic training, there's a rarely discussed practice that holds profound power, relaxing the gaze. Not just to rest the body, but to calm the mind. Because when the eyes are tense, darting, or overly focused, the nervous system reads it as danger. But when the eyes soften, when the gaze stops reaching and begins to receive, everything inside starts to shift. It's not magic. It's neurobiology. And it's also deep Dharma. You don't need to close your eyes to find peace. Sometimes the path begins by changing how you see. Not just metaphorically, literally. Letting the eyes rest without fixating. Letting vision be open instead of narrowed. Because a hard gaze creates a hard mind, and a soft gaze invites a softer inner world. When monks walk through forests or sit beneath trees, they're often taught not to look directly at any one thing for too long. Not to analyze, not to grip with the eyes, but to let vision become panoramic, unfocused, but awake. This isn't laziness, it's deliberate surrender, because when the eyes are scanning too intensely, it tells the mind there's something to be afraid of. And when that signal softens, the mind gets permission to rest. Anxiety doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stares. It watches the future through mental images, sharpens focus on problems, magnifies the smallest detail into danger. This tight visual channel feeds the alarm system. It says, stay alert, don't miss anything. But the truth is, hypervigilance doesn't prevent pain. It prolongs it. And the habit of sharp focus becomes a habit of inner contraction. Relaxing the gaze begins to undo that contraction. You let your eyes rest on nothing in particular. You feel the space around your sight, not just the objects within it. It's like watching the sky, not the birds. And slowly, the breath responds. The jaw loosens. The shoulders drop, because the mind follows the eyes, and soft eyes are a signal that you are safe now. There's deep science behind this. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, activates when the eyes are narrow, fixated, or rapidly shifting. But the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest state, activates when the eyes soften, when peripheral vision widens, when the gaze becomes gentle. This is how the body tells the brain, we're okay. And in Buddhism, that's not just a tool, it's a doorway. Many people try to calm their thoughts directly, but the mind doesn't always listen to logic. It listens to the body, and the eyes are a fast channel. Instead of arguing with anxiety, you can change how you're seeing, not by looking away, but by looking differently. Less like a searchlight, more like a window open to the breeze. Softening the gaze isn't about daydreaming, it's about shifting from control to presence, from grasping to receiving, from pushing outward to allowing inward. This isn't New Age suggestion, it's an ancient teaching. The Buddha taught his monks to walk with their eyes lowered slightly, focused gently on the ground ahead, not to hide from life, but to meet it without resistance. And when you try this, even now, you might feel it. A subtle wave of calm, not because the world changed, but because the lens through which you see it changed. The world didn't become less stressful. Your body stopped bracing for it. And in that tiny moment, the inner war paused. This is how the sensory gate opens. You shift the input, and the output transforms. You allow the body to lead the mind. You stop trying to calm yourself with words alone, and instead, you meet the nervous system through the senses it trusts most. Let your gaze settle now. Don't stare. Don't drift. Just let vision be soft. Let the edges blur. Let your awareness feel the room, not scan it. Let the walls be walls. Let the objects sit without labeling them. Just see, and then feel what follows. You may notice your inner world stop sprinting. You may find the muscles that didn't know they were clenched start to open. This is not passive. This is active stillness. The discipline of no longer chasing. The skill of resting while awake. In Zen tradition, this is sometimes called open-eyed meditation, a way to train in life, not apart from it. A practice that says, your eyes can be open and your soul still soft. For those living with chronic anxiety, this may feel unfamiliar. The eyes have been trained for years to scan for the next threat, the next problem, the next judgment. And that vigilance has a cost. It keeps the system lit like a warning lamp, even when there's no fire. So when you soften your vision, you're telling your brain, the fire is out. You can rest now. Try doing your daily activities with this gaze. Wash the dishes while letting your eyes rest gently on the water, not focused, just present. Walk slowly and allow your peripheral vision to open. Notice how the mind quiets when the eyes stop trying to manage the scene. And yes, this will feel strange at first, especially if you've spent years over-focusing. It may feel like you're not paying attention, but you are. You're just paying attention without pressure. You're meeting the moment without force. And that changes everything. This is not detachment. This is release. The release of holding life too tightly. The release of using the eyes as a spotlight for fear instead of a window for stillness. You may even begin to notice that the way you look at the world shapes how the world feels. A sharp gaze makes everything urgent. A soft gaze makes everything spacious. And in that space, anxiety melts, because there's nothing to fight, nothing to chase, just presence, just enough. This is what monks mean when they speak of seeing with the heart. It's not poetry, it's physiology. When your gaze softens, your whole system softens. And in that softness, you remember something you forgot during the fight, that peace isn't behind effort, it's behind surrender. You don't need to fix your anxiety tonight, you just need to soften around it. Let your vision be the invitation. Let your body feel what it's like to stop searching. Let your mind receive that signal and say, I am allowed to be still now. And when you wake tomorrow, you may find your day begins differently. Not because the stress is gone, but because you're no longer meeting it with sharpness. You're meeting it with ease. Now that your eyes are soft and your nervous system is listening, let's go even deeper. Because sometimes anxiety isn't coming from what's happening now. It's coming from something struck long ago, still echoing in the mind like a bell. As the eyes begin to soften and the mind starts receiving instead of reaching, something buried starts to rise. Not a panic, not a thought, a presence, a hum beneath the quiet. It doesn't come from what's happening now, but from something long ago, something unresolved. It's the echo of a moment that never fully ended. The body may have moved on, life may have continued, but the nervous system never got the message, and so the bell still rings, not loudly, but constantly. This is one of the hidden roots of anxiety. It's not just about future fear, it's about past pain that never found peace. The moment someone said something that cut too deep, the day safety disappeared. The time you had to keep going when all you wanted to do was stop and cry. These aren't memories, these are trapped signals, emotional patterns encoded in breath, posture, reflex, reaction. They don't announce themselves. They blend into your current mood, making today's anxiety seem spontaneous, when really it's inherited from yesterday. In Buddhist meditation, especially in Vipassana, this is one of the great insights. The present is rarely pure. It's colored, tinted by echoes of what wasn't healed. That's why the same comment from two different people feels so different. Why some situations make your heart race without warning. Why restlessness appears in stillness. You're not overreacting, you're reacting to the past, using the language of the present. The bell that was struck may have been a small event, a word spoken carelessly, a look that made you feel unseen, a moment of failure that still clings to the ribs like it just happened. These moments lodge themselves not because they're dramatic, but because they were too heavy to carry when they arrived. So the mind did what it could. It stored them. But stored emotion doesn't disappear. It just waits for a trigger. Vipassana teaches you how to stop running from that trigger, not by diving into stories, but by observing sensation. When the old echo arises, it doesn't always look like a memory. Sometimes it's a tightness in the chest, a sudden heat, a spinning thought that won't stop. And instead of trying to explain it, the practice is to feel it, fully, clearly, without naming it, without pushing it away. The body remembers what the mind has forgotten, and through sensation, it begins to speak. You start by sitting still, not because stillness is peaceful, but because it reveals what's hidden, the agitation that's been avoided, the sorrow that's been compressed. You sit and feel, not to suffer, to see. Vipassana means clear seeing, and that seeing isn't intellectual, it's visceral. You feel the ripple of old pain, the heat behind the thought, the trembling behind the smile, and you don't flinch, you witness, because only what is fully seen can be fully released. Anxiety loses power when the past stops pretending to be the present. And for that to happen, you need to slow down enough to notice the difference. A boss isn't just a boss when the echo of a parent's anger still lives in your nervous system. A friend's silence isn't just silence when it mirrors the rejection you never spoke about. Vipassana doesn't ask you to analyze all this. It asks you to sit with the sensation it creates and stay. The staying is the key. The bell wants to be heard, not silenced, not repressed, just fully felt without being relived. You don't go back into the story. You go forward into the sensation. That tight knot in your stomach, that burning behind the eyes, that's the echo. That's the bell ringing again. And when you sit with it, not running, not fixing, just breathing, it begins to fade. Not because you forced it, because you finally heard it fully. There's a moment in every Vipassana retreat when someone realizes their present anxiety isn't about what's happening now. It's about what never got to finish. The interrupted sadness, the frozen fear, the panic that had to be swallowed. And in that realization, a door opens. A way out that doesn't involve fixing the world, just feeling what's already here without distraction. This isn't easy. It's not glamorous. There are no fireworks, just sitting, breathing, watching. And slowly, piece by piece, the nervous system rewrites its relationship with old emotion. It learns that presence is safe. That sensation is not danger, that the past is not now. Even if the bell rang decades ago, your body might still be vibrating from the sound, and the only way to stop the echo is to stop pretending it's gone. Feel it. Breathe with it. Label nothing. Just sense. The more you do this, the more you notice subtle changes. The pain doesn't vanish, but it shifts, it spreads, It becomes movement instead of blockage, and eventually it leaves. Not every echo needs to be explained. Some just need to be heard, fully, without interruption. When the Buddha taught about suffering, he didn't say, eliminate the past. He said, know it, understand its causes, witness its movement. And in that witnessing, the grip softens, the chain weakens, the identity that formed around it begins to crumble. You are not the moment that hurt you. You are not the echo that stayed. You are the space that can now hold it with love. That is your freedom. Next time anxiety appears, ask, is this fear about now, or is it the bell again? Listen, not with your ears, but with your body, with the stillness beneath the thought. Don't chase it. Don't change it. Just meet it. Sometimes the bell only rings because no one ever listened. Now you're listening. And in that attention, the nervous system rewires its expectations. It starts to believe what you tell it through action. This moment is safe. This body is held. This pain is no longer exiled. You become the refuge you always needed, the one who doesn't abandon, the one who doesn't run. And over time, the echoes get quieter, not because they're pushed away, but because they're resolved. They've been given the stillness they never had, the silence between the strikes, the pause that holds the healing. And as the sound fades, what remains is something more honest than any story. Just breath, just warmth, just space. Let your body rest here. Let the nervous system feel the sound go quiet. You don't need to explain your healing, you just need to allow it. And now that the echo has been heard, we step into the forest, because there is a way to be alert without being afraid, a way to sense what's around you without clinging to what's inside you. Let's walk beside the deer in the forest and learn the gentle art of watching without holding. Once the bell of the past has been heard and allowed to fade, something strange often follows. Not peace, but hesitation. A kind of quiet where the mind doesn't know what to do next. It's no longer tangled in memory, but it doesn't feel free either. That's because what comes next is subtle. It's not about fixing, it's about relating, not to the story, but to sensation itself, to the emotions that still arise, to the thoughts that still pass through. The nervous system is quieter now, but it still listens for danger. And this is where the next teaching matters most, learning how to watch without holding. In the Thai forest tradition, monks observe animals closely, not just as metaphor, but as real teachers. One of the most revered is the deer, because the deer is alert without being afraid, sensitive, but not tense. It hears everything, sees everything, but it doesn't panic unless it must. It stays still, but aware. That's what the mind can become, a deer in the forest, not grasping at every sound, not flinching at every thought, just present, just noticing. Anxiety doesn't need the mind to fight it. It just needs space to move. But most people either chase it down or run from it. Very few learn how to simply let it pass. The deer doesn't hold the wind. It doesn't try to understand every noise. It hears, it senses, and it allows. That's the heart of forest meditation. You don't react, you receive. You don't suppress, you don't analyze. You sit, you breathe, you watch. Watching is not the same as controlling. This is important. Most people try to observe anxiety with the goal of changing it. That's not watching. That's strategy. The mind that watches without holding expects nothing. It doesn't judge the fear. It doesn't reward the calm. It simply stays with what arises. Not because it wants to get somewhere, but because presence is the goal. This takes discipline, not the discipline of force, but of patience. The discipline to sit with the restlessness instead of trying to quiet it. The discipline to stay when the mind wants to leave. Forest monks sometimes meditate in the open jungle with no walls, no protection, exposed to sound, weather, insects, not as punishment, but to train the mind to stop reacting, to stop needing conditions to be perfect, to develop a mind that sees without clinging. This kind of watching builds something stronger than calm. It builds courage, because when you can stay present without needing to change what you feel, you stop fearing your emotions. You stop fearing fear itself. The deer doesn't fight the feeling of being alert. It lives with it, but it doesn't let that feeling control its every move. That's how you begin to live, awake but unshaken. The problem is not that thoughts arise, it's that we grab them. The fear itself is not the weight, it's the clinging that makes it heavy. The deer sees a shadow and notes it. But if it doesn't turn out to be danger, it lets it go. No story, no obsession, just attention and release. This is what forest practice teaches so well. Attention without tension, awareness without identity. Try this the next time anxiety shows up. Don't push it away. Don't dig into it. Sit with it like a deer sits with wind. You feel the presence. You stay alert. But you don't assume it means danger. You just note the sensations. Tightness in the chest, warmth in the face, fast breath. You name it lightly. Tension, heat, pressure, and you breathe with it, not to fix it, just to let it move. This changes everything, because the anxious mind usually wants a reaction. It feeds on resistance. But when there is no resistance, it begins to calm itself, not through effort, through space. When you become the deer, you stop hunting the feeling and you stop running from it. You learn to stand still while the world moves. This stillness builds resilience, not the fake kind that hides how you feel, the real kind that allows feeling without fear. It's the difference between drowning in waves and floating on them. The waves don't stop, but your relationship to them changes, and the body starts to trust that emotions aren't permanent, that fear passes if you don't feed it, that thoughts can move like clouds if you stop grabbing them. Forest monks don't meditate for peace. They meditate to know the mind. Peace comes as a side effect. The goal is understanding. And the understanding that frees you is this: nothing stays, not the fear, not the thought, not the discomfort. And if you stay long enough, without holding, you see it for yourself. You feel the anxiety rise, peak, and fall, like a breath, like wind through trees. Even the most intense panic has a rhythm. But you can only see it if you don't interrupt it. That's what forest practice is about: patience, simplicity, presence. Watching not to change, but to understand. Understanding not to fix, but to accept. Acceptance not to give up, but to be free. You don't need a forest to learn this. You just need a moment where you don't flinch, where you let the wave come through without grabbing your board, where you trust that staying still, for once, is not failure, but power. The anxious mind tells you that you must act now, that you must solve the feeling or it will swallow you. But you've already proven something else. You've already sat through echoes of the past. You've already softened the eyes. You've already watched without fixing. And in those moments, anxiety lost something. Its grip, its urgency, its certainty. Now, you're learning to become the watcher, not the one who chases, not the one who hides, the one who sees clearly and holds nothing. That's not disconnection. That's true connection. Connection without need, presence without pressure. So stay with the breath, stay with the body. Let the deer in you rise. Let your attention stretch wide. Take in the whole scene without focusing on any one part. Let thoughts pass. Let fear pass. Let the tension pass through you like wind through open branches. You are not the one being hunted. You are the one watching. And from that stillness, everything changes. Now that your mind knows how to stay without gripping, let's turn to something even more delicate, your voice. Because sometimes the fear isn't just in what you feel, it's in what you say, or what you're afraid to say. After learning to watch without holding, to let the mind rest like a deer in the forest, you may begin to notice a quieter layer of tension. One that doesn't always show up in the body or even the thoughts. It hides in the mouth, in the throat, in the words never spoken, or in the ones repeated endlessly after they've already left. This is a different kind of anxiety, not the fear of what might happen, the fear of how you will sound, what others will think, what your voice will mean to the room. This is the tension of being seen not as a body, but as a voice. The fear that your words are being measured, judged, that they could betray you, that they could define you forever. Speech anxiety can be paralyzing, not because speaking is unnatural, but because of the meaning we attach to the sound. We assume our words carry our worth, that if we say something wrong, we are something wrong, that if we're misunderstood, we've failed. This turns simple conversations into high-stakes performances. Even silence starts to feel like a trap, and this inner pressure builds. Every social interaction becomes another layer of overthinking, not because the world demands it, but because the mind won't let go of the imagined stage. But the Buddha taught something that dissolves this illusion. Sunyata, emptiness. Not emptiness as nothingness, but emptiness as openness. Emptiness as the understanding that all things, including words, have no fixed meaning, no solid identity, no permanent judgment. A word spoken is just a sound carried by air. It rises, it lands, it fades. The wind moves it, but the wind doesn't carry its burden. This is the shift that begins to free the anxious speaker. The realization that your voice is not a verdict. Your message is not a monument. It's a passing ripple, a vibration through space. What gives it weight is not the sound itself, but the story you tell about what it means. The imagined audience, the feared reaction, the fantasy of consequence. But what if all of that was just air? Speech anxiety is not solved by rehearsing more. It's softened by understanding less. Understanding that words do not define you. They describe passing thoughts. They offer attempts. They're not final. They're not fixed. They are like everything else in this world, impermanent. And when you see this clearly, the grip begins to loosen. You stop clenching before you speak. You stop replaying every phrase after the fact. You let the sound rise and fall, like breath, like wind. In Zen practice, monks are trained to speak with precision, not because the words must be perfect, but because the awareness behind the words matters more. When you speak from presence, not performance, the energy shifts. You're not trying to impress. You're not trying to protect. You're simply expressing what is true in that moment. That truth may be incomplete. It may not be received the way you intend. But that's not something you control. And when you finally stop trying to control it, speech becomes a gift, not a test. The fear of speaking often comes from the illusion that others are always watching, always judging. But the truth is, most people are too absorbed in their own minds to remember your every sentence. And even if they are judging, that judgment doesn't live inside your voice. It lives in their perception. And perception, too, is empty. It shifts, it projects, it fades. The Buddha's teachings on sunyata help reframe this entire experience. When you truly see that everything, thoughts, words, opinions, is dependent on conditions, not essence, you stop needing to prove anything. You don't have to be clever or flawless or perfectly understood. You speak because there is something present to share, and that presence is enough. Try this. Before your next conversation, notice what's happening in your body. Is the jaw tight? Is the throat dry? Is the mind rehearsing possible outcomes? Don't correct it. Just watch it. Breathe through it. Remind yourself, these are just patterns, not predictions, not punishments, just echoes of the nervous system trying to protect itself. And the protection is not needed, not because the world is safe, but because you are no longer depending on approval to feel whole. Many people think confidence is the absence of fear, but real confidence is the absence of attachment to outcome. You may still feel nervous, but you speak anyway, not to be impressive, but to be honest. And that honesty is powerful even when it shakes, especially when it shakes. Speech anxiety weakens when you stop treating conversation as performance and start relating to it as presence. You're not auditioning, you're connecting. And connection doesn't require perfection. It requires truth. Let your words be light. Let them carry only what they must. Let the rest fall away. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to sound wise. You don't need to be eloquent. You need to be here, fully, with the person, with the moment, with yourself. And when the mind starts replaying the interaction later, what you should have said, how you could have worded it better, come back to the breath. Come back to the ground. Come back to sunyata, the emptiness of form, the impermanence of sound, the softness of now. That thought you're replaying, it's already gone. That judgment you fear, it's not your responsibility. Even the Buddha, with all his clarity, was misunderstood. Not because his words failed, but because people hear through their own filters. Your job is not to speak perfectly. Your job is to speak sincerely, and then release, like the wind. In forest monasteries, there's a tradition of noble silence, not as avoidance, but as reverence. Speech is not forbidden, it's respected. And when words are spoken, they are held lightly, not clung to, not obsessed over, spoken, then gone. This is how you begin to shift. You stop over-identifying with your voice. You stop mistaking language for self. You let your words be temporary, like a bird call, like a breeze, like anything alive, beautiful, momentary, and then moving on. This doesn't mean your voice doesn't matter. It means it doesn't define you. It means you can speak without fear of being reduced to a sentence. You can say what's needed and let it go. This is what it means to let the wind carry the sound, not the burden. Now, rest your throat. Rest your breath. Feel the space around your voice. You are allowed to say less. You are allowed to say more. You are allowed to pause. And now that the voice is no longer your burden, we continue. Because there's one more lesson the flame will teach us next. Not about sound, but about motion. It flickers, it moves, but it does not go out. Once the voice is released, no longer held in the grip of judgment or fear, there's a strange quiet that follows. But this silence doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it makes room for something else to rise. A wave of feeling, a tightness in the chest, a trembling behind the stillness. The mind may be calm, the words may be gone, but emotion still flickers. That's where many people get confused. They think if they've practiced presence, the waves should stop. That stillness should mean nothing moves. But in Buddhism, stillness isn't the absence of movement. It's the ability to stay unmoved while things move through you. This is where equanimity begins. The word for this in the ancient texts is upekkha, not coldness, not detachment, but deep balance, a centeredness that holds steady even when the wind picks up. Think of a candle in a room where the air is never still. The flame flickers, it leans, it sways, but it doesn't go out. That's the practice. Not to freeze your emotions, not to stop the movement, but to stop panicking when they rise. Anxiety is not the wave, it's the panic that the wave will pull you under. It's the fear that because you're feeling, you're failing. That because your mood shifted, you've lost your grounding. But the flame that flickers isn't weak. It's alive. It's responsive. It moves with the air, not against it. And that movement is not a threat. It's a dance. Equanimity doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't cling. You don't collapse. You don't try to hold the flame still. You let it flicker and you stay steady in the watching. This is one of the most advanced forms of Buddhist meditation, not because it's complex, but because it requires trust. The trust that you can feel strong emotion and not be destroyed by it. The trust that intensity doesn't mean danger. It means energy is moving. When a thought spikes, when a feeling crashes in, the untrained mind tries to push it away or fix it. But equanimity holds space. It says, this too belongs, not in a passive way, but in a strong, rooted way. You become the holder, not the reactor. You become the ground beneath the wind. And in that holding, the emotion finds its own way out. Not forced, not denied, just given room. This is especially important for those dealing with chronic anxiety, because sometimes the body gets used to feeling off, and any flicker of calm is seen as fragile. You wait for the next drop. You brace for the next spiral. But that bracing is its own kind of suffering. Upekkha says, no bracing, just balance, just breath, just presence that bends but doesn't break. You learn this not in the big storms, but in the small ripples. When a minor frustration shows up and you feel the heat rise, pause. Notice the flicker. Don't blow it out. Don't fan it. Just stay. Breathe. Feel it shift. Feel it move. Notice that you didn't collapse. Notice that nothing needed to be solved for the wave to pass. That's equanimity in action. And the more you notice it, the more it becomes your natural state. There's a misunderstanding that equanimity is emotionless. But the Buddha never taught numbness. He taught freedom. And freedom doesn't mean you never cry. It means you're not afraid to cry. It means you trust that you won't drown in it. It means when joy comes, you don't cling to it like it's your last breath. And when sorrow comes, you don't shut the door. You just keep breathing. You stay with the flicker. A monk once said, "You know your equanimity is strong when you can hold pain and not tense your face." That doesn't mean pretending it doesn't hurt. It means you trust the process. You don't interrupt it with fear. You let the emotion burn clean, like a candle giving off light, not destructive, illuminating. The reason this matters for anxiety is because most of the suffering isn't in the emotion itself. It's in the resistance to it, the pushing, the grasping, the interpretation. What if this never stops? Why is this happening again? I thought I was over this. These thoughts take the flicker and turn it into a wildfire. But when you practice equanimity, you stop feeding the fire. You stop panicking about the flicker. You let it move. You let it change. And you realize it always does. This also applies to positive emotions. Sometimes we cling just as hard to peace as we do to fear. We finally feel calm and we try to lock it down, make it stay. And that pressure turns it brittle. But when you meet joy with equanimity, you allow it to flow without fear of losing it. You let it nourish you without owning it. You know it will pass, and you know it will return. This trust in movement is powerful. It rewires the nervous system. It teaches the body that nothing is final. Not the fear, not the calm, not the story. Everything changes. And that's not bad news. That's the path to freedom. When you begin to live like this, you stop tracking your emotional state like a stock ticker. You stop judging every up and down. You stop calling it a setback when a wave returns. You just breathe. You stay. You feel the flicker, and you let it flicker. That's what makes the candle strong, not its stillness, but its endurance. One of the Buddha's most repeated phrases was, "Develop a mind like the earth." The earth doesn't reject rain. It doesn't fight fire. It holds it all, with stability, with silence. That's the mind you're cultivating, the one that doesn't flinch when the mood shifts, the one that stays rooted while the wind changes direction. And in practical terms, you do this by staying connected to the body. When a wave of emotion hits, drop into the breath, into the soles of your feet, into the weight of your hands. Let your attention spread wide, not narrow. Let sensation hold you. Don't try to explain the feeling. Don't try to end it. Just stay. Like the earth, like the candle. This is not about perfection. It's about relationship. How do you relate to your emotion when it rises? That's the practice. You don't need to feel calm to be at peace. You just need to feel without fighting. And that's something you can do, even now, especially now. So, if you feel the flicker tonight, don't rush to silence it. Let it move. Let it show you that you can bend without breaking, that you can feel deeply and still stay present, that you don't need to fix every emotion to find balance. Equanimity is not far away. It's not a trait you're born with. It's a skill, and like any skill, it grows with practice. Every time you don't run, it grows. Every time you don't grip, it grows. Every time you let yourself feel without trying to disappear, it grows. And slowly, that flickering candle becomes your teacher. It shows you how to stay bright in dark rooms, how to move with emotion, not against it, how to light your own path without burning out. You don't need to hold steady like a stone. You just need to remember. Even in movement, you can be grounded. Now that you've found your center in the motion, there's another layer to release. Because anxiety doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hides in care, in effort, in the fear that if you let go, nothing will hold. After learning to stay steady through emotional movement, to be the candle that flickers but does not go out, a deeper clarity begins to rise. You start to see that the struggle was never about the feeling itself. It was about the fear of losing control. The fear that if you don't hold on tightly enough, things will fall apart. That if you stop managing every detail, the people you love might slip away. That if you care less, it means you don't care at all. But what if the opposite is true? What if holding too tightly is what causes the pain? And what if letting go doesn't mean abandoning what matters, but trusting it more deeply? This is the subtle trap of perfectionism, of obsessive planning, of the need to secure outcomes before you can rest. It wears many faces: responsibility, commitment, high standards. But beneath all of it is fear. Fear that if you don't do it just right, something or someone you love will be lost. This is where anxiety hides in the heart, not in panic, but in care that's been distorted into control. It's not that you feel too little, it's that you feel so much you try to protect everything at once. But Buddhist wisdom points to another way, a stronger way. The Bodhisattva path teaches us that letting go and loving are not opposites. In fact, true compassion is only possible when we release our grip on outcomes. The Bodhisattva doesn't love less because they expect less. They love more because they're not attached to whether that love is returned, understood, or seen. They offer presence, not possession. And in that offering, there is peace. Anxiety says, control everything to keep everyone safe. But what it really means is, don't relax until the world behaves the way you need it to. And since the world never fully cooperates, anxiety never truly rests. The problem isn't your intention, it's the condition. The belief that love requires guarantees, that care must come with certainty, that you can only exhale after all outcomes are secure. But the Buddha taught that all things are impermanent, all plans are conditional, all relationships change, not as punishment, as nature. Trying to lock down the outcome is like trying to pin a shadow to the floor. It only deepens the tension. What brings freedom is loosening the grip while keeping the heart open, letting go of the result without letting go of the love. This distinction is critical because many people confuse detachment with disconnection. They think that not clinging means not caring, But compassionate non-attachment is the opposite of coldness. It's what allows love to breathe, to be offered without fear, to exist for its own sake, not for what it returns. Think of someone you care about deeply. Now notice how your anxiety shows up in that care. Do you rehearse conversations in your head, trying to say the right thing? Do you carry the weight of their emotions as if it's your job to fix them? Do you feel responsible for their choices, their happiness, their peace? That's not love, that's anxiety in disguise. And it doesn't mean you're bad. It means your heart is trying too hard to carry what can't be carried. Letting go doesn't mean withdrawing. It means trusting. Trusting that your presence is enough, even if the outcome is uncertain. Trusting that your love matters, even if it's not returned the way you hoped. Trusting that your effort is valuable, even if the results don't show right away. That trust is where the real healing begins. And this is not a passive practice. It's active surrender. It means showing up fully, doing what you can, and then stepping back. Releasing the inner demand that everything must go a certain way. Releasing the pressure to predict, to prevent, to perfect. This is how you let the heart breathe again. This is how you remember that you are not the author of other people's stories. You are a chapter, a voice, a presence, but not the pen. The Bodhisattva teaches by example. They don't demand peace from others, they become it. They don't seek control, they embody care. And they don't need to prove their value, they live it. This is the hand that lets go, but still holds peace. It doesn't squeeze, it offers, it doesn't chase, it supports. Try this in your next moment of stress. When you're overthinking how something will turn out, ask yourself, am I holding this because I love it, or because I fear losing it? And if the answer is fear, soften your grip. Breathe. Say silently, I release the outcome, not the care. Let the energy of control dissolve and feel what's left. If it's real, it will stay. If it's not, it was never yours to hold. In daily life, this might look like expressing your truth without trying to convince anyone, like helping someone without expecting thanks, like doing your best work without obsessing over how it's received, like loving someone fully even if they are not ready to receive it. Because the peace comes not from being understood, but from being honest. Perfectionism is another form of attachment. It tells you that only flawless efforts are worthy, that only ideal conditions can bring calm. But the Bodhisattva doesn't wait for perfection. They move through the mess. They act from love, not fear. They stay steady in the middle of uncertainty, because they know the heart can remain open even when the future is unclear. This level of detachment is not cold, it's sacred. It's what gives you the energy to keep going. Because when you stop trying to carry the weight of every possibility, you can finally walk freely. When you stop trying to control people's reactions, you can finally speak clearly. When you stop trying to ensure the outcome, you can finally offer the fullness of your effort. Letting go is not the end of love. It's the beginning of freedom. It's what allows you to be present without pressure, to care without collapsing, to give without depletion. And in this space, something extraordinary happens. The people around you feel it. They sense the shift. They respond not to your control, but to your calm, not to your demands, but to your presence. That's the paradox. Letting go doesn't weaken the connection, it deepens it. Because what you offer when you release attachment is the most valuable thing anyone can give: unconditional presence. So rest here. Let the hand unclench. Let the shoulders drop. Let the mind stop bracing for results. You are allowed to care deeply without managing everything. You are allowed to show up fully without knowing how it ends. You are allowed to love with both hands open. This is the hand that lets go and still holds peace. Once the hand has learned to let go without closing, and the heart has remembered that love doesn't require control, something deeper becomes possible. A shift not just in emotion, but in identity. You begin to wonder, if I am not the one controlling the outcome, then who am I? If I don't hold these feelings so tightly, what's left to hold on to? The answer waits quietly behind every thought, behind every sensation. It doesn't push, it doesn't shout, it watches, always. And tonight, it will finally be seen, because there is something in you that doesn't come and go, something that doesn't rise and fall with the mood, something that isn't anxious when fear appears, and isn't shaken when sadness passes through. That presence is not an idea, it's not a belief, it's not a personality, it is awareness itself. And the moment you begin to rest in that space, rather than in the waves, you touch a peace that anxiety cannot disturb. This is the heart of Satipatthana mindfulness. Not just noticing what arises, but remembering what sees. Observing the mind, not as the one inside it, but as the one watching it unfold. Noticing feelings, not as self, but as movement within something larger. Like clouds drifting across a sky that never moves. The clouds change shape, speed, color, but the sky remains. This is where freedom begins to deepen, when you stop identifying with the storm and begin identifying with the space. Most people live their whole lives as if they are their thoughts, as if they are their moods. And when fear arises, they say, "I'm afraid." When anger arises, they say, "I'm angry." But Satipatthana teaches a subtle truth. You're not afraid. Fear is present. You're not anxious. Anxiety is arising. You're not broken. A difficult state is passing through. This may sound like a small difference, but it's everything. Because when you believe you are the thought, then every thought becomes life or death. But when you see the thought as just a visitor, you can let it come and go, like a bird that lands for a moment and flies on. You don't have to become the bird, you just observe. And this observation is not distant, it's not detached, it's intimate, present, alive. You're not running away from the feeling, you're surrounding it with awareness. You're saying, "I see you, you are here, and you are not me." That sentence can change your life. Anxiety often convinces us that the feeling is our identity, that because it feels so close, it must be who we are. But the truth is, awareness is always closer. The one who sees the anxiety is not anxious. The one who notices the thought spiral is not spiraling. The space that watches the fear is not afraid. This is what it means to be the sky that does not fear clouds. Not because clouds never come, but because the sky knows they don't stay. And the sky never asks the clouds to stop. It doesn't argue with their shape. It doesn't cling to the clear days or fight the storms. It allows. It witnesses, And through that witnessing, it remains untouched. Practicing this takes time. It starts with small moments. When you catch a thought like, "I'm not doing enough," you pause, you name it. Thought about inadequacy is arising. That's it. Not, "I'm failing," just, "This thought is here." And then you breathe. You place your attention not in the thought, but in the space around it. You feel the body. You notice the breath. You become the one who sees. The Buddha gave many instructions for this. Contemplate the body in the body. Contemplate the feeling in the feeling. Contemplate the mind in the mind. This isn't repetition, it's deepening. Each instruction invites you to look through the experience, not just at it, to stop being lost in it and start resting behind it. Even in the middle of anxiety, this is possible. You may feel the chest tighten. You may hear the thoughts racing, but a part of you sees this happening. That part is stable. That part is silent. That part is free. And the more you return to it, the more natural it becomes. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you've always been, before the thoughts, before the fear. The thoughts will keep moving. The weather will keep changing. But you are the sky, wide, open, unshaken. In daily life, this practice becomes a way of relating to everything. When someone says something sharp, you feel the sting, but you also feel the awareness noticing the sting. You don't collapse into reaction, you witness it. And by witnessing, you interrupt the chain of suffering. You may still speak, you may still act, but the source of your action is no longer fear, it's clarity. You're not trying to control the situation, you're responding from presence. And presence is not reactive, it's intelligent. It sees without becoming. It knows without needing to fix. This practice also brings profound humility. You realize how often you believed your thoughts were the truth, how often you fought shadows, argued with memories, chased clouds, and now you see them for what they are, temporary expressions within something eternal. The mind will still try to pull you in. That's its habit. It will say, "Think more, fix this, figure it out." But now you know where to return, to the space behind the noise, the breath, the body, the watcher. And that watcher needs nothing. It's not striving, it's not judging, it's simply here. When you begin to identify with that, rather than with every emotional storm, you become less fragile. Not because emotions don't happen, but because they don't own you. You can feel deeply without being undone. You can let sadness rise without calling yourself sad. You can let anxiety pass without becoming anxious. This doesn't mean you float through life unaffected. It means you live rooted in something that doesn't shake when the wind blows. You stop reacting to every shift. You stop building your worth on emotional weather. You rest in something deeper. You begin to know, I am not my mood. I am not my thought. I am not my fear. I am the field in which these things appear and disappear. And in that knowing, there is freedom. So sit quietly now. Let thoughts come. Let them go. Don't follow. Don't push. Just watch. Stay in the sky. Let the clouds pass, even the heaviest ones. You do not need to stop the weather. You only need to remember that you are not the storm. You are the space it moves through. You are the stillness it cannot reach. Once you begin to live from the sky and not the storm, clarity follows. You notice your thoughts more gently. You see your feelings with less urgency. But even then, something strange happens. One small thought suddenly grows 10 feet tall. One comment, one worry, one memory expands into something massive. You know it's not logical, but it feels true. It feels overwhelming, like you're a small creature standing beneath something you'll never be able to lift. And this is where the mind begins to trick you again, not through fear, but through scale. Anxiety distorts size. It takes something manageable and makes it monumental. A passing moment becomes a permanent identity. A simple task becomes a test of worth. A single unknown becomes the end of peace. And before you know it, you're an ant trying to carry a mountain. But Buddhism offers a lens that returns reality to its right proportions. A teaching that doesn't just calm the mind, but shows it what's real. That teaching is paticcasamuppada, dependent origination. In simple terms, it means that nothing arises independently. No thought appears in isolation. No emotion exists without roots. Everything is connected. Everything is caused. And when you understand this, not intellectually, but directly, your problems begin to shrink. Not because they're fake, but because they're not as solid as they seemed. A fear doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built from conditions. It's made of past experience, body tension, memory, stories, mood, timing. It's a chain, not a single point. And when you see that chain, you stop believing the end is where it began. You stop collapsing under the full weight of a thought that isn't actually whole. You stop carrying a mountain that was never one solid thing. This shift is subtle, but life-changing. You start to say, this panic didn't just arrive. It came from poor sleep, too much caffeine, a harsh word this morning, a past wound that's been echoing, a body that feels tired, and a mind that forgot it's allowed to rest. And suddenly, the mountain begins to crumble into its pieces. You see what's happening, not as destiny, but as a mix of passing conditions. That's the heart of paticcasamuppada. Everything depends on everything else. Nothing stands alone, and when you see that, nothing feels quite so heavy. Think of the last time you spiraled. Trace it. Did it really begin with the event? Or did it begin with how you were already feeling? With the meaning you gave the event? With the expectations, the fatigue, the fear behind the fear? This tracing is not overthinking. It's awakening. You're not getting lost in the past. You're untangling it. You're taking apart the illusion that your suffering is one unchangeable thing. Even the heaviest panic attacks follow this pattern. They're not just fear. They're a layered process. Bodily tension, rapid thoughts, anticipatory dread, isolation, and behind all of that, a story that says, I can't handle this. But when you slow it down, each link is small, each piece is workable, and the whole thing begins to soften. The Buddha described this process in 12 links, but the core truth is simple. If something arises from causes, it can fade with the removal of those causes. No mountain is eternal. It only looks that way when we stare too close. Pull back. Look again. The cracks appear. The illusion thins. The burden lightens. And here's what's even more powerful. Just as fear arises from conditions, so does peace. Stillness isn't random. It's built too, from rest, from breath, from kindness, from presence, from letting go. If you can create the conditions for anxiety, you can also create the conditions for calm, not by force, but by shifting the roots. This is why perspective is not just a mindset, it's a path. When you change the way you see, you change what you carry. And the more you practice this, the more you begin to smile at the mind's trick. Ah, it's doing it again, making everything look bigger than it is. And instead of collapsing, you step back, you breathe, you question the scale. You ask, is this really a mountain, or is it just today's shadow? Perspective also gives you access to humor, and humor is holy. It breaks the tension. It reminds you that the mind's drama is not the truth. You start to laugh, not in mockery, but in relief. That a mind can be so convincing, that anxiety can shout so loud about something so small. And in that laugh, another crack forms in the illusion. This practice doesn't mean minimizing your emotions. It means putting them in context. It means not letting a passing thought define your whole day. It means not letting a temporary fear rewrite your entire story. When you see the roots, you can care for the roots. When you understand the shape of your inner weather, you can stop blaming the sky for the storm. You begin to say, this isn't me. This is a result of what's moving through me. This doesn't make the pain disappear, but it makes it human. It makes it understandable. It brings it back to size. And this works not just with fear, but with shame, with grief, with all the emotions that feel overwhelming. They all have causes. They all have layers. They are not you. They are not permanent. And they are not alone. So the next time a problem feels massive, sit down, breathe slowly, and begin to trace the roots. Name what's feeding it, not to judge, but to understand. I'm feeling dread because I'm exhausted, because I haven't eaten, because I'm scared of failing, because I tied my worth to success, because I learned early that love was conditional. Suddenly, the pain becomes visible. And when it's visible, it's workable. You're not an ant carrying a mountain. You're an ant walking beneath a sky, stepping over small stones, encountering hills that only feel enormous when seen through a magnifying lens. And that lens? It's in your hands. You can put it down. You can step back. You can see clearly again. This is not denial. It's truth. The truth that suffering grows when misunderstood, and peace returns when things are seen as they are, not as they pretend to be. So let the mountain shrink. Let the fear come back to scale. Let the self stop bracing for collapse. You are not too small. The problem is not too big. The weight is not what it seemed. When the mountain becomes smaller and the pressure begins to lift, you gain a little distance, a little room to breathe, to reframe, to rest. But in that space, something older often rises. Not a new fear, but a familiar ache. A question that doesn't speak loudly, but lingers in everything. Can I trust myself? Because long before the panic began, long before the tension hardened into habit, there was a crack, a moment, sometimes many, when the ground inside you shifted, and you began to doubt the one person you're always with. This is not just fear of the world, it's fear of your own response. Will I handle this well? Will I fall apart again? Will I make the right choice or let everyone down? These are not questions about logic. These are questions about trust. Trust that broke quietly. Trust that once lost becomes the silent fuel of anxiety. This is where the work deepens, because healing isn't just calming the surface, it's restoring what cracked underneath it. And in Buddhist practice, there's a teaching that leads the way. It's called Kshanti, forbearance. Often misunderstood as passive patience, it actually means something far stronger: the ability to remain inwardly steady through discomfort, the willingness to stay with yourself, especially when the emotional weather turns. It is the path to rebuilding self-trust, not through perfection, but through consistency, not through control, but through presence. Anxiety often feeds on self-betrayal, not because you want to hurt yourself, but because somewhere along the way you had to abandon what you felt. Maybe to survive, maybe to please, maybe to avoid conflict. But the result was the same. You stopped listening to yourself. You stopped believing your emotions were valid. You stopped being able to count on your own judgment. And once that link breaks, every choice becomes a threat. Every situation becomes a test you're not sure you can pass. Kshanti invites you to rebuild from the inside, not by pretending to be unshakable, but by practicing one small truth. I will not leave myself. Even when I feel fear, even when I doubt, even when I disappoint myself, I will stay. I will not abandon this moment, this body, this breath. This is the mirror that doesn't break, not because it never cracks, but because it learns how to reflect clearly even through the fracture. Rebuilding self-trust begins in the smallest places. When you feel overwhelmed and choose not to run. When you make a promise to rest and actually follow through. When you acknowledge your feelings without trying to explain them away. These moments may seem simple, but they speak directly to the nervous system. They say, "You can trust me now. I don't disappear when it's hard." Many people think trust is built by getting it right, but in Buddhism, trust is built through returning, over and over, to the breath, to the body, to the truth of what's here, not needing to fix it, just meeting it fully. This returning becomes your new reliability. You stop waiting to feel perfect before you act. You act with what's true now. You say, "I'm afraid, and I can still show up. I'm not sure, and I can still breathe." That honesty creates an inner home you can live in. It also softens the voice of the inner critic, the one that says, "You failed again," the one that points to every past moment of collapse. Kshanti doesn't argue with the critic. It outlasts it. It continues anyway. It responds with quiet action. Yes, I fell apart, but here I am, breathing again, grounding again, not perfect, but here. This is how the mirror heals, not by becoming flawless, but by reflecting reality as it is, with compassion. One of the deepest roots of anxiety is the fear that you cannot trust your own stability, that if pain comes again, you'll collapse like last time. But here's the truth. You are not the same as you were then. You have learned. You have stayed with the breath. You have softened in the fire. That version of you did what they could, and this version of you is learning how to hold the mirror steady. Trust doesn't mean you never get overwhelmed. It means you don't abandon yourself when you do. It means you don't say, "I can't handle this." You say, "This is hard, and I am here." You return to the next breath. You move through the next moment. You feel what's true without judging it. And every time you do, the nervous system writes a new line of code. We can stay. We don't have to run. This is the core of emotional resilience, not suppression, but steadiness. Not being above emotion, but not being swallowed by it. And it's built in silence, in stillness, in presence. When you sit through the discomfort without trying to fix it, without needing to escape, something new forms inside you. A quiet power, a grounded loyalty to your own experience. That's what the mirror reflects when it doesn't break. It reflects your commitment to stay. Not to feel amazing, not to be impressive, just to remain. That presence changes everything. It becomes the foundation under your fear, the quiet beneath your thoughts. And as that foundation grows, so does your capacity. You begin to notice how much of your anxiety was not just fear of life, but fear of your own collapse. Now, you know you won't collapse. Not forever. You may shake, you may flicker, but you come back. You breathe again. You take the next step. This is the truth you've earned. It's also the truth that makes you gentle with others. Because when you learn not to abandon yourself, you stop expecting others to hold what you haven't learned to hold. You meet people with less demand, less projection. You give the love you used to crave, and in that giving, your heart heals more. Kshanti is quiet. It's not loud like courage. It doesn't shine like joy, but it's steady like the earth. It holds you when the mind spins. It stays when the feeling floods. And it teaches you that resilience is not about bouncing back. It's about continuing to breathe while you're still down, still scared, still unsure. This is not an ideal. It's a practice. And like any practice, it starts now, with how you're holding your body, with how you're speaking to yourself, with how gently you're letting this moment unfold. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to remain, to stay with yourself when it matters most. This is the mirror that doesn't break. This is the self-trust that cannot be stolen. Now that self-trust has been gently restored, a steadier foundation begins to form beneath every breath. The mind feels less like an enemy and more like a wave that can be ridden. The nervous system begins to believe, even when it's hard, you will not leave yourself. But even from this place of clarity, one specific pattern still lingers. A fear that doesn't arise from what's happening now, but from what might happen next. The mind starts to rehearse imaginary dangers. It projects discomfort before it arrives, and what grows isn't truth, but tension. Not from the moment you're in, but from the one that hasn't come. This is the ache of anticipatory anxiety, the part of the mind that leans forward into what isn't real yet. It imagines disaster, then reacts as if it's already happening. The body tenses, the stomach turns, the breath shortens. All because of a scenario that only exists in thought. The future becomes a place of suffering long before you ever reach it. And this suffering feels real, not because of what's occurring, but because the mind treats imagination like experience. Zen teachings offer a gentle way to unravel this, not through more thinking, but through moving differently, through touching the ground again, one step at a time. This is the essence of Zen walking meditation, not just a technique, but a truth, that the present moment is the only place where peace is possible, that worry about future pain is not pain, It is an echo of absence, a tension built on a moment that has not and may never come. The illusion of future pain is powerful because it's invisible. It speaks in the language of what-ifs. It sounds like preparation. It pretends to be responsible. But it's not clarity. It's confusion wrapped in urgency. It says, feel it now so you won't be surprised later. But feeling it now doesn't protect you. It depletes you. It makes the nervous system relive consequences that haven't happened, over and over, with no resolution. Zen walking meets this illusion not with argument, but with rhythm. Step, breath, step, breath. Not with distraction, but with directness. The practice is simple. Feel the foot as it lifts. Feel the air shift as the leg moves forward. Feel the ground touch the soul. Not as an idea, but as sensation. This pulls the mind back from its projections. It reminds the body that the only place you exist is here. The only moment where life happens is this one. The step that hasn't landed yet is not your concern. You are only responsible for the one you are living. Anticipatory fear is like a foot that never touches the ground. It's always suspended, never settling, always bracing. It waits for impact that may never arrive. And so, the body stays in midair, tense, unbalanced, tired. Zen meditation brings that foot back to earth. It lets the body arrive first, and then teaches the mind to follow. You don't need to stop thoughts of the future. You only need to stop building your identity in them. They are not evidence, they are forecasts, and forecasts shift. You are not your prediction, you are your presence. That's the difference between anxiety and awareness. One tries to control what hasn't happened. The other meets what is happening with open eyes. When you notice the spiral beginning, those thoughts about next week's meeting, that awkward conversation you think will happen, the thing you're scared to face, pause. Feel your body. Are your shoulders already reacting to the image in your head? Is your breath already responding to a sentence that hasn't been spoken? Notice it. Don't push it away. Just step back into the moment. Ask gently, is that happening now? If not, return to what is. The feel of the chair, the sound in the room, the breath that's always been with you. The mind may return to the fear. That's not failure, that's habit. And habit can be retrained, not through force, but through repetition. Each time you bring the attention back to the ground, you create a new pattern. A body that doesn't follow every imagined threat. A nervous system that waits for reality before it reacts. Zen teachers say the mind is like a wild horse. If you chase it, it runs faster. But if you sit quietly, it circles back. The more you anchor in the now, the more the mind learns to trust that now is enough. It stops racing ahead. It stops trying to feel pain before it arrives. This doesn't mean ignoring the future. It means separating planning from pre-living. You can plan from presence, but when you start emotionally rehearsing catastrophe, you've left reality. That's the difference. One builds clarity, the other builds tension, and your body knows the difference before your thoughts do. The pain of the imagined future is only possible when the present feels unsafe. So you rebuild safety here, through breath, through movement, through grounding in what your senses can confirm. No need to argue with the fear. Just don't feed it. Let it come, let it pass. and place your awareness back on the step you're taking. Zen monks practice walking meditation slowly, not to go anywhere, but to arrive more fully. Each step is complete. Each breath is whole. This is not performance. It's remembering that you are not the story. You are the one who walks through it. Anxiety often attaches to false certainty. It wants to know how it will end. It wants reassurance that nothing will go wrong. But nothing in life offers that, and the pursuit of it is exhausting. Walking meditation teaches you to let go of that demand, to let the foot fall without needing to see the whole path. You don't need to control what's ahead. You only need to meet what's here. This practice also teaches you to stop postponing peace. The anxious mind says, "I'll relax once this is over." But that day never comes. There's always another future to worry about. Zen says, stop waiting, walk now, breathe now, rest here. The step you're taking is already sacred. The breath you're holding is already enough. And when the future comes, you will meet it as you have met this moment, with awareness, not fear, with presence, not projection. So let the foot land, let the body arrive, let the moment hold you. You are not the pain that hasn't happened. You are not the story that may unfold. You are the awareness that walks, one step at a time, through whatever arises. Now that the mind has been pulled gently out of the imagined future and returned to the quiet rhythm of presence, something deeper begins to settle. But even in stillness, even in the calm of knowing that this moment is safe, storms still pass through. The body still reacts, the chest still tightens, thoughts still return, and that's where frustration can grow. Why am I still feeling this? Why hasn't it left for good? But this is where another misunderstanding falls away. Peace is not the absence of storms. It is the ability to recognize that storms are not forever. The anxiety that rises doesn't mean you're failing. The returning sadness doesn't mean you're broken. These are not permanent features. They are weather, and weather changes. There's a well-known story told in the forest monasteries of Southeast Asia. A monk once meditated during the monsoon season, far from shelter, wrapped in a single robe, with only a thin roof above him. As thunder rolled and wind cracked against bamboo, the other monks grew restless. Some stayed awake, alert with fear, watching the storm. But this one monk slept, not from laziness, from trust. When asked later how he did it, he replied, "Because I remembered it was just the sky moving." This is what it means to stop over-identifying with temporary emotional states. The anxious wave that moves through you is not the end of your stability. It's just the sky moving, a passing event, a weather pattern. It doesn't define the sky. It doesn't change what holds it. When anxiety shows up, the mind wants to declare it a crisis. It wraps the feeling in meaning. I'm regressing. This is proof I haven't healed. It's always like this. But these are not observations. They are conclusions. And conclusions stick. They turn moments into identities. They turn sensations into stories. But the monk who slept through the storm didn't try to convince himself the storm wasn't there. He simply didn't make it personal. He didn't turn weather into self. The difference between weather and climate is duration. Weather moves. Climate is what endures. Anxiety is weather. It comes, it stirs, it leaves. But when you believe it is your nature, you start to live like it's your climate, like it will always be this way, and that belief creates more tension than the anxiety ever could on its own. Buddhist training emphasizes this over and over. Do not cling to mental formations. Do not grasp what is rising. Do not reject what is passing. Watch, witness. Let the internal storm blow through the same way you would watch wind through trees. You don't demand it stop. You don't name yourself by it. You meet it with presence. And in that presence, the panic loses its fuel. Think about your strongest emotional moments. Did they last forever? Or did they move through you like waves? Even the ones that returned, did they return the same way each time? No, because even repetition changes. The sky never repeats a cloud exactly, and neither does the mind. To stop over-identifying with emotion is not to become numb. It's to become wise. It's to recognize that the way you feel in one moment is only a fraction of your total experience. The mood may fill the room in your awareness, but that's not the whole house. You are more than what the current moment shows, and that knowing allows the storm to pass without defining you. In Buddhist meditation, this is often practiced through noting. A thought arises, and you say silently, thinking. A fear arises, and you say, fear. Not, I'm afraid, just, fear is here. This small shift creates space. It gives the emotion room to move. It gives the self freedom to observe without merging. Try this during a wave of anxiety. Don't argue with it. Don't reassure yourself. Just note it. Tightness, heat, racing thought. No story, no resistance, no diagnosis. Just weather, just movement, just clouds in a vast, unchanged sky. Over time, this practice rewires your emotional responses. The body begins to learn that strong emotion is not danger, it is energy. The breath deepens, the shoulders soften, the inner commentary quiets, because presence replaces panic. This is how the monk sleeps through the storm, not because he controls the weather, but because he no longer believes the weather is him. He knows the sky is not angry, the sky is not weak, the sky is not falling. It is holding space for what passes, and so are you. Even in daily life, this understanding changes how you move. When someone upsets you, the reaction might still rise, but you no longer fuse with it. You say, there is anger, not I am angry. And that small space between you and the emotion gives you a choice. You can feel it, but not become it. You can witness it, but not weaponize it. This doesn't mean suppressing. It means allowing without collapse, feeling without fusing, acting without over-identifying. You are the ground that holds the rain, the sky that holds the lightning, the space that holds the sound. And because of that, you don't have to resist your storms. You don't have to fear the next wave. You don't have to over-explain your feelings to yourself. You can meet them like passing clouds, with patience, with stillness, with that same quiet nod the monk gave the wind when he turned his face to sleep. You can say, "Ah, this storm again. I've seen you before. I'll watch you move through. I'll still be here when you're gone, because you will be. Now that the mind has remembered it is not the weather, but the sky that holds it, a deeper truth comes into view, an old truth that lives beneath thought, beneath even emotion. Because sometimes, even when the storm passes, the body still holds the thunder. The shoulders stay tense. The breath remains shallow. The stomach clenches as if bracing for what has already passed. And this is where anxiety hides in its final form, not in the mind, but in the body that has been carrying what words never resolved. This is the kind of anxiety that doesn't speak clearly. It doesn't arrive with thoughts like, "I'm afraid," or "I'm worried." It arrives as unease, as fidgeting, as aches in the chest, as an edge in the jaw that won't release. It lingers like static, like something trapped inside, waiting for an exit. And this is where Buddhist somatic awareness becomes more than philosophy. It becomes medicine. Because long before anxiety was named in psychology, it was known in practice as tension held in the clay pot of the body, as energy that needed to be released, not argued with. The early Buddhist texts point again and again to the body, not just as a container, but as a map of sensation, of memory, of unprocessed reaction. The Buddha didn't just tell monks to watch their thoughts. He told them to sit with their bodies, to notice posture, to feel breath, to trace the way emotion shapes the physical form, because every emotion leaves a trace. And anxiety, more than most, sinks deep into the structure of the body like lightning into wet earth. It hits, it passes, but the charge remains. This is why someone can say, "I'm fine," while their breath remains tight. Why the mind may feel calm, but the stomach is still knotted. Because release isn't always mental, it's physical, and release begins not through explanation, but through attention, through learning how to notice where anxiety lives in the body, where it hides, where it hums, and then learning how to pour it out through movement, breath, posture, and presence. The body is honest. It doesn't fake calm. It doesn't pretend to be at ease. It shows you exactly where the tension lives. But most of us are trained to ignore it, to override it, to sit through meetings while the chest screams, to sleep while the legs twitch, to stay still while every cell begs to move. And this is why anxiety lingers, not because we don't want peace, but because we never let the body fully empty the charge. In Buddhist monastic training, walking meditation isn't just for focus, it's for integration. Movement allows energy to exit. The feet become conduits. The rhythm becomes a valve. The tension built up from sitting, from silence, from memory, begins to flow again. And this movement isn't random, it's mindful. Each step is felt from heel to toe. Each breath is placed with care. This union of movement and breath allows the nervous system to unwind in real time, not through force, through release. Even seated, posture matters. The Buddha often spoke of sitting like a mountain, stable, upright, present. This isn't about performance, it's about signaling to the body that it is safe, that it doesn't need to curl forward, shrink, or guard. Most anxious bodies lean forward, collapse inward, the spine folds, the shoulders hunch. The body says, "Something is coming." But when you sit upright, not stiff, but aligned, the message changes. You say without words, "This moment is not a threat." And when breath meets posture, release begins. Not through deep breaths that fight the anxiety, but through soft, slow breathing that meets the body where it is. You don't need to change your breath. You need to feel it, to follow it through the nose, into the ribs, down to the belly, and out again. Not forcing it deeper, just allowing it longer. The breath knows how to unwind what the mind has tangled. This awareness is the foundation of Vipassana body scanning, noticing the sensations one part at a time, feeling heat in the shoulders, noting it, feeling tingling in the hands, noting it. No need to change anything, just presence, because presence allows flow, and flow allows release. One of the most overlooked teachings of Buddhism is that clinging shows up in the body first. Before the thought says, "I'm scared," the muscles say, "I'm tight." Before the emotion names itself, the breath hesitates. So if you want to let go, don't start with the mind. Start with the muscles. Start with the posture. Start with the place where the holding begins. This is why movement-based mindfulness exists. Qigong, walking, gentle stretches, even mindful shaking, not as exercise, as discharge, as communication with the parts of the nervous system that words cannot reach. The body remembers what it couldn't say, and when you move it with care, it gets to finish the sentence. This is not about perfection, it's about practice. You don't need to know every technique. You need to listen, to notice, to meet the tightness with curiosity, to ask the chest, "What are you holding?" To ask the stomach, "What are you bracing against?" Not to fix, just to witness. And in that witnessing, tension loosens. You may feel warmth, you may feel shaking, you may feel tears rise with no name. Let them. These are not problems. These are exits. The lightning is leaving the clay. One of the most compassionate things you can do is stop asking your body to stay still while it is shaking inside. Let it move. Let it speak. Let it return to a natural state of softness, not through suppression, but through expression. This is the path to nervous system restoration, not control, not numbing, but respectful release. The clay pot was never meant to hold lightning forever. It was meant to receive it, hold it briefly, and then let it go. So sit now, or lie down, or walk slowly, and ask your body, not your mind, where do you feel unfinished? And listen, without needing to explain, without rushing to change. Just let the breath reach it. Let gravity help. Let presence soften what effort could never fix. You are not broken because your body holds anxiety. You are wise because you are finally letting it go. Once the body begins to release what it was never meant to carry, a certain quiet naturally follows. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty or cold, but the kind that feels like being held. And in that stillness, something else becomes visible. A space that most people miss. A place that has always been there, but rarely noticed. It isn't loud, it doesn't ask for attention, but it changes everything when you finally see it. It's the silence between thoughts. Most people think anxiety is a constant stream, a non-stop flood of worry and tension. But even in the most restless mind, there are gaps. Tiny pauses, brief silences between one thought and the next, between one fear and the next scenario. These silences are not nothing. They are not the absence of thinking. They are the presence of clarity, of awareness without noise. And learning to notice them is the beginning of peace that doesn't depend on fixing anything. In the teachings of Chittanupassana, mindfulness of mental formations, this space is where real transformation begins. Not by analyzing thoughts, but by noticing the texture of the mind itself. Not what the mind says, but how it moves, how it rises, how it fades, how even the busiest mental storms are built from individual clouds. And between those clouds, sky. The mind is not one thing. It is movement. It is moment after moment of mental formation, arising, passing, arising again. But if you look closely, there's a subtle rhythm. A thought ends, then a pause, then another begins. These pauses are not empty space. They are the mind resting in itself, the awareness behind the content. And the more you notice them, the longer they become. This isn't something you create, it's something you uncover. It has always been there. Even in your most anxious moments, there were small seconds of stillness, but anxiety trains you to overlook them, to fill the gap quickly, to search for the next problem, to scan ahead. So the silence gets stepped over, ignored, forgotten. But now you're learning to stay. Try this. The next time you catch yourself in the middle of overthinking, pause. Let the current thought finish. Don't chase another. Wait. Just breathe. You may notice the next thought rushing forward. That's okay. But you may also notice something else, a flicker of quiet, a breath without commentary, a body not planning, not reacting, just being. This is the doorway. The Buddha described the mind like a bell. You strike it with a thought, and it rings. But even after the sound fades, the bell still exists. It doesn't disappear. That's awareness. It's not the ringing. It's the still presence that remains when sound is gone. And every time you rest in the pause, you return to that presence. Chittanupassana doesn't ask you to eliminate thoughts. It asks you to observe their formation, to watch them arise, not as facts, but as events, to feel the energy behind them, the habits, the assumptions, the patterns, and most importantly, to notice the space before they take shape, the space where thought begins, but has not yet formed. That's where peace lives. As you begin to rest in these micro-pauses, anxiety starts to lose its urgency, because it's no longer driving the car. It's just one passenger, one part of a larger rhythm, and the silence becomes a seat you can return to, not just when things are calm, especially when they're not. This also rewires the nervous system. When you stop reacting to every mental event, your body learns that not every thought is a command. Not every worry needs solving. Not every possibility is danger. The gap between thoughts teaches your system something different. It teaches safety without explanation, ground without effort. Over time, the space between thoughts gets easier to access. At first, it feels like trying to hold your breath underwater. Then, it becomes like noticing the breeze in the trees. Then, it becomes your new home, not a place you visit, a place you live from. And in that home, everything softens. Your tone with yourself, your relationship with fear, your expectations of the future. You stop needing every thought to be productive. You stop needing every emotion to be explained. You let the mind move, but you don't move with it. Even when anxious thoughts return, and they will, they land differently. Because you're no longer stuck inside them, you're resting just behind, watching, breathing, knowing this too will pass. You don't need to interrupt the thought, you just don't follow it. You return to the pause, you let the silence grow. This shift is subtle, but profound. You stop being dragged by the mind. You become the one who chooses when to listen, when to respond, and when to simply rest in the space that has always been waiting. So take a breath now. Let the last thought finish. Don't reach for another. Stay here, in the pause, in the exhale, in the silence that asks nothing of you. This is not escape. This is reality without noise. This is not empty. This is full in a different way. This is the silence the anxious mind forgot existed. But you didn't forget. You're here now. You've remembered. And in this remembering, the most ordinary moment becomes sacred again. Now that you've touched the stillness between thoughts and remembered that even silence can hold you, a deeper shift becomes possible. You begin to see that peace doesn't always arrive in stillness alone. Sometimes it reveals itself in motion. But not just any motion, the kind you don't control, the kind that flows without your permission. This is where anxiety resists the hardest, not because movement is dangerous, but because uncertainty feels like a threat. The mind wants a plan, a promise, a path with guarantees. But the truth is, life is more like a river than a road, and the more you try to fight the current, the more exhausted you become. This is where Buddhist wisdom offers a radical alternative. Not passivity, not apathy, but surrender. The kind of surrender that isn't about giving up. It's about giving into the truth of anicca, impermanence, the central thread that weaves through every part of existence. Nothing stays, not fear, not comfort, not even peace. And that's not a problem. That's the path. Anxiety often feeds on resistance. The mind says, I need to know what's coming so I can prepare. But what it's really saying is, I need to control what's coming so I can feel safe. That control becomes a kind of armor, a shield built from planning, worry, and constant mental rehearsal. But like a leaf trying to steer a river, the effort doesn't stop the flow. It only creates more struggle. The Buddha didn't ask his followers to fix uncertainty. He asked them to sit with it, to study it, to learn to trust it. Because everything changes. This isn't a poetic idea. It's the way things are. The inhale ends, the exhale begins, the joy rises, the fear returns, the stillness deepens, the storm passes, and underneath it all, life keeps moving, regardless of your grip. This is what the leaf understands. It does not surrender by accident. It surrenders by design. It floats, not because it's powerless, but because it knows that the river has always moved. That stillness inside can exist even in the middle of motion. To trust uncertainty is not to romanticize chaos. It's to accept that control was never a guarantee. That the security you seek by overthinking and overmanaging isn't stability. It's tension dressed as safety. When you let go of needing the future to obey you, something unexpected happens. You start to breathe again. You start to realize that you were never meant to carry everything, that the mind trying to force solutions is like a swimmer trying to hold the entire river in one hand. It's not possible, but it's also not necessary. This is the heart of anxiety reduction through surrender. Not numbing yourself to outcomes, not avoiding hard choices, but releasing the grip on what you cannot determine while still showing up fully for what you can. You learn to float, not to drift aimlessly, but to align with what is already unfolding. You learn to choose presence over prediction, and every time you do, you stop feeding the part of your nervous system that thinks uncertainty equals danger. Let's say you have a big event coming up. The anxious mind says, "What if it goes wrong? What if I mess up?" But underneath those thoughts is a deeper fear. What if I can't survive disappointment? That's the real fear, not the event, but the belief that if something painful happens, you'll fall apart. But floating teaches you otherwise. It says, pain may come, but it won't destroy you. You've survived before, you'll adjust again. The river keeps moving, so will you. This trust in anicca, impermanence, is not blind faith. It's built through watching, through noticing that nothing you feared lasted forever. Not the last wave of panic, not the last regret, not the last moment of self-doubt. They all passed, sometimes like storms, sometimes like mist, but they passed. When you live from this awareness, your grip loosens. You don't need every conversation to end perfectly. You don't need every decision to prove your worth. You don't need every step to be mapped out. You trust the process, not because it's easy, but because it's honest. This is where many people confuse surrender with apathy, but they're not the same. Apathy says, I don't care what happens. Surrender says, I'll care deeply, but I won't control what can't be controlled. Apathy numbs. Surrender liberates. This surrender also changes how you relate to yourself. You stop needing to be the perfect version of you every day. You allow the bad moods, the messy moments, the uncertainty within your own growth. You begin to say, this is what's true today, and that's enough. Not because it's ideal, but because it's real. And when you trust the flow of impermanence, you also become more compassionate. You see that others are floating too, that everyone is managing something unseen, that no one has it all figured out. And in that shared current, you soften. You stop comparing timelines. You stop judging where you are. You stop rushing toward a future that never arrives the way you planned. Instead, you begin to live from the leaf's perspective, gently, attuned, letting go without disconnecting, moving without controlling, showing up without bracing. Try this now. Bring to mind something unresolved, something you don't yet know how to fix. And instead of solving it, breathe. Say silently, I allow this to be unfinished. And notice what happens in the body. Maybe a softening in the chest. Maybe tension rising first, then loosening. Maybe nothing at all at first, but space. That space is the beginning of trust. This trust doesn't mean you stop acting. It means you stop overacting. You stop flooding the system with extra noise. You stop treating every moment of uncertainty like a cliff edge. You begin to live more lightly, not because life is light, but because you've stopped gripping so tightly. That's what the leaf teaches. It moves not because it's weak, but because it's free. And so can you be. Now that the body has remembered how to float, and the mind has tasted the freedom of not needing to control the future, there's one final habit still pulling beneath the surface. Even when you've let go of outcomes, even when you've stopped fighting the flow, thoughts still appear. They return. They loop. Not loud, not always urgent, but persistent. The inner debate starts again, not because you're seeking truth, but because the mind is still trying to protect you through overthinking. And so the cycle continues. A conversation with yourself that never ends. A search for closure in a place where no final answer lives. This is the loop of inner argument. A restless mental habit rooted in dukkha. That quiet suffering born from resisting what is. The thought doesn't hurt. What hurts is the refusal to let it pass. What drains you is the insistence on solving a moment that never needed to be solved. The mind says, let's just revisit it one more time, as if the 50th replay will bring peace. But it doesn't, because peace was never hiding in the answer. It was waiting in the release. In Buddhist practice, this is known not as failure, but as habit energy, a deeply conditioned reflex. The mind attaches to discomfort, then tries to outthink it. It starts arguing with a past you can't change, or debating a future that hasn't arrived, or challenging the worth of your own feelings, and each thought tries to prove something. It says, if I just think through this the right way, it'll finally go away. But the thought doesn't want to go away. It wants to be engaged, and the more you engage it, the more real it feels. The way out is not by winning the argument, it's by not entering it. That's what the thought that let itself go understands. It doesn't resist. It doesn't defend. It doesn't correct. It simply steps back. Not from apathy, but from wisdom. It knows that internal debates don't bring clarity. They drain it. They wrap truth in confusion. They take a passing moment and stretch it into a lifelong question. But when the thought is met with awareness instead of resistance, it loses its grip. It starts to dissolve. Not instantly, but gently, like steam rising from warm water. You can practice this right now. Think of something your mind has been spinning on, a conversation you keep replaying, a decision you keep questioning, a judgment you keep resisting. Now let that thought rise, but don't feed it, don't answer it, don't explain it. Just notice. This thought is here. Label it softly. Worrying, replaying, doubting, and then breathe. Let the thought continue if it wants to, but you don't follow. This isn't suppression. You're not pushing the thought away. You're choosing not to grip it. You're treating it like a passing cloud, a breeze that enters, then exits. This is mindfulness applied to mental formations, the heart of Chittanupassana. Watching the content of the mind without identifying with it, without needing to fix it, without believing every sentence that appears. This practice doesn't mean you never think. It means you don't believe that every thought deserves your full attention. You start to develop discernment. You learn to tell the difference between useful reflection and compulsive argument. One leads to understanding, the other leads to exhaustion. The thought that lets itself go doesn't need closure to rest. It doesn't need to prove itself innocent or guilty. It just needs space, permission to pass without performance. And that space is what you offer when you no longer fight with what is. This is where anxiety begins to lose its strongest weapon, your attention. Because attention is what makes the loop feel real. It's what gives the thought energy. Without your engagement, the thought becomes background noise. It loses color, it loses speed. Eventually, it fades into the silence it came from. But this doesn't happen through force. It happens through repetition. Each time you choose not to argue, you weaken the loop. You teach your nervous system that mental noise doesn't need a reaction. You begin to trust your awareness more than your inner courtroom. You stop needing to resolve everything in your mind before feeling safe in your body. And when the thought does return, as it likely will, you treat it like an old friend with nothing new to say. You don't push it away. You don't indulge it either. You greet it with stillness. You let it rise, and you let it go. Just like breath, just like clouds, just like every other moment that passes through awareness. This is not detachment from life. It's connection with what's actually here. The loop distracts you from the moment. It pretends that peace is on the other side of one more analysis. But peace doesn't live in conclusions. It lives in presence, and presence begins when argument ends. Let this become your new habit. When you notice the debate starting again, pause. Drop into your body. Feel your feet. Feel your breath. Don't answer the thought. Just notice the urge to argue, and let that pass too. You may feel discomfort rise. That's okay. That's the habit unraveling. You don't need to fix the discomfort. Just stay with it. Let it burn without story. Let it breathe without fuel. This is how the system resets, not by controlling thoughts, but by disarming their need for defense. Soon, you'll begin to feel a shift, a spaciousness, a quiet between thoughts that doesn't need to be filled, a mind that rests even when thinking continues. You'll stop needing your thoughts to be perfect. You'll stop using argument as a shield. You'll start living beneath the commentary, in the place where clarity doesn't arrive from conclusions, but from presence. You are not the loop. You are not the story. You are not the judge or the defendant. You are the space the thought rises in. You are the awareness that notices, then lets go. Once you've learned how to stop engaging in inner arguments, how to watch a thought rise and let it pass without needing to answer, it might seem like the noise would settle entirely, and often it does. But sometimes, even after the thought has gone, the echo stays. The mind is quieter, but the silence feels loud. It hums, it rings, it fills the space like pressure in a sealed room. There's no external crisis, no specific fear, no clear thought, just the strange weight of too much happening inside all at once. This is what many experience without knowing how to name it. Sensory and cognitive overload. Not just from thoughts, but from the residue they leave behind. It's the body still bracing even after the worry has passed. It's the nervous system still alert even when there's nothing to protect against. It's the mind that wants to rest but doesn't know how to turn down the volume. You've walked into the room, but the echoes are bouncing off every wall. Buddhist monks who lived in seclusion encountered this often. After days or weeks in silence, many expected the mind to fall into deep peace. But the opposite would happen. The noise didn't stop. It amplified. Thoughts became more subtle, but more persistent. Sensations grew louder. Tiny inner movements became sharp. And what they discovered is something most of us never learn. Silence itself is a skill. We're not born knowing how to rest in inner quiet. especially in a world that never stops speaking. We spend years training the mind to react, to plan, to consume, to fix. But rarely do we train it to soften, to release without collapse, to stay present without stimulation. The mind becomes like a room that's never had furniture. Every sound echoes, every step reverberates, and the only way to quiet the echo is not to fight it, but to gently fill the space with steady, grounded presence. This begins with recognizing that stillness isn't just the absence of movement, it's the presence of attunement. Inner silence isn't what happens when you eliminate all thought. It's what arises when you stop amplifying thought with reactivity. When you meet each mental ripple with calm, when you begin to replace commentary with breath. This is why monks are trained to notice every detail: the lift of the foot, the sound of a bird, the feeling of breath in the nostrils. Not to distract, but to root the mind in something stable, so that the echo becomes background, so that sensation becomes grounding instead of overwhelming. This same skill can be brought into daily life. Start small. When the noise inside feels too loud, don't rush to escape it. Stay where you are. Find one anchor. It could be your hands touching. It could be the feel of your back against the chair. It could be the rhythm of a single word repeated slowly. One focus, not to silence the mind, but to quiet your reaction to its movement. You may still hear the noise. You may still feel the hum, but you begin to shift how you respond. You stop treating it like an emergency. You stop trying to silence it through tension. Instead, you soften into it. You listen without grabbing. You feel without clinging. And in that, the volume begins to drop. This is also where the breath becomes a tool, not for control, but for recalibration. When you breathe slowly, without forcing depth, the nervous system begins to unwind. When the exhale is just a little longer than the inhale, the body starts to believe it's safe. And when safety is felt, not just thought, the noise inside begins to lose its grip. You might not feel instant silence, but you'll notice something else. The echo becomes less personal. The pressure becomes more tolerable. The room no longer feels like it's closing in. It starts to feel like space, space that belongs to you again. Monastic practices also teach the value of rhythm, chanting, walking, repetitive movements. These aren't rituals of performance. They're tools to organize inner chaos, to give the mind something to lean on when the internal noise tries to scatter it in every direction. Even in modern life, rhythm helps. Washing dishes slowly, brushing your teeth with attention, taking 3 breaths before answering the phone. These are not minor acts, they are anchors. They are what build furniture inside the echoing room, so that sound has something to land on, so that silence becomes stable. Another forgotten practice is listening to silence itself, not forcing it, just noticing it. The space between sounds, the pause between sentences, the way air feels in a quiet room. At first, it feels like nothing, but if you stay, it becomes something sacred, a kind of presence that doesn't speak but teaches. Over time, this practice teaches the nervous system a new response. That stillness is not a threat. That quiet isn't something to fill. That rest doesn't require achievement. It just needs permission. And this inner silence isn't blank. It's rich. It's full of signals. It lets you hear what your body has been trying to say. It lets you feel without commentary. It lets the mind find its natural rhythm again, not racing, not frozen, but gently flowing. You begin to realize the noise wasn't the problem. The problem was how tightly you clung to it, how much you feared what the silence might reveal. But when you stay long enough, you discover it reveals nothing to fear, only space, only breath, only now. So, let yourself sit. Let the room echo. Let it ring. And as you stay, let your breath become the rhythm. Let your attention become the furniture. Let your body become the home. This is how inner quiet is created, not by silencing every sound, but by changing how you hear. Now that the noise has softened and the echoes have been met with presence rather than resistance, the space within feels less hostile, more like a place to settle than something to escape. But even as silence arrives, there's still something delicate to work with. A mind that wants to wander. A mind that doesn't know how to rest in stillness for long. It shifts. It twitches. It pulls away from quiet like a hand from cold water. And this is not a failure. It's simply untrained attention. A mind that hasn't yet learned how to stay. How to remain anchored in one place long enough to find clarity again. This is where the practice of samatha, calm abiding, becomes essential. It's the art of using a single thread to hold the mind when everything inside wants to unravel. Not through pressure, not through force, but through steady, neutral focus. A gentle invitation to stay with one object so that the chaos begins to loosen. Not because you've solved it, but because you've stopped feeding it. An anxious mind is like 1,000 birds trying to fly in 1,000 directions. It doesn't need another bird. It needs a thread, something stable, something simple, something that doesn't react, doesn't change, doesn't argue. A breath, a sound, a repeated word, a movement, not for the sake of doing something, but to give the mind one place to land. This thread is not a distraction. It's a lifeline. It connects the scattered energy back to center. It says to the mind, you don't have to hold everything right now, just hold this. And in that holding, something shifts. The internal spiral begins to lose its spin. The thoughts keep moving, but they stop sweeping you away. You start to watch them from a steadier ground. Choosing your thread depends on what feels stable in the moment. The breath is one of the oldest and most reliable anchors, not because it's special, but because it's always present, always moving, always returning. You don't need to breathe deeper or slower. Just notice the inhale, follow it in, feel the pause, follow the exhale out. One cycle, then another. No story, no fixing, just sensation. If the breath feels too tight or unavailable, sometimes anxiety can make it feel that way. Choose something else. A sound, like a soft chime repeated. A simple mantra, silently repeated inside. Here, or now, or peace. Let it be rhythmic, not mechanical. Let it guide the mind like a current guiding a boat. The power of this practice is not in how still your thoughts become, but in how gently you return when they wander. Every time the mind strays, and it will, you notice and you come back. That return is the practice, not the stillness. The return, again and again, without judgment, without punishment, just, I've left. Let me come back. Over time, this gentle repetition begins to rewire your attention. You stop expecting your thoughts to behave. You stop waiting for perfect peace before beginning. You simply keep holding the thread, like a climber holding a single rope while ascending a shaky path. You don't need to grip tightly, just don't let go. This practice is especially helpful when worry spirals have already started, when your thoughts are racing ahead, when you're revisiting conversations, catastrophizing, or rehearsing things you can't control. Instead of trying to fix the content of the thought, return to the thread. Let the story unfold if it must, but you stay anchored. You don't chase the storyline. You stay with the breath, or the word, or the sound. Eventually, the spiral loses energy, not because you argued with it, but because it didn't get what it came for, your full attention. Spirals feed on attention. They feed on resistance. Take those away, and they fade. In Buddhist monastic life, samatha was always taught before vipassana, calm before insight, because a scattered mind can't see clearly. But a held mind begins to settle, and in that settling, clarity arises on its own. Not forced, not hunted, just uncovered. This practice also builds confidence. You stop fearing your own mind. You stop treating every wave of thought as something to suppress or solve. You develop a relationship with your own inner landscape, one of patience, one of steadiness, one of quiet strength. It's important to choose a thread that feels neutral, not emotionally charged, not exciting, just steady. Something you can return to again and again without drama. The purpose isn't to entertain the mind, it's to simplify, to offer refuge. The world is already complex. This is your space to rest. And the beauty of this practice is that it becomes portable. You don't need a meditation cushion. You don't need silence. You can practice while waiting in line, while walking, while falling asleep. The thread can follow you anywhere, and each time you touch it, you remind your system, I know how to come home. This is especially important for those living with chronic anxiety, because anxiety doesn't ask for permission. It arrives unannounced. It floods without warning. And when that happens, you may not have time to analyze or process. But you can anchor. You can return to your thread, even if it's only for a breath or two. That small return is not small. It's everything. Over days, weeks, and months, the practice compounds. What once felt like chaos starts to feel less threatening. Not because the world changed, but because your grip did. Because you know how to meet the moment without needing to manage it all. This is the wisdom behind the thread. That sometimes the most powerful response isn't solving the problem. It's steadying your attention, so that the problem doesn't become your identity, so that the moment doesn't become your prison. You are not your spiral. You are not your scattered thoughts. You are the one who holds the thread, the one who knows how to stay. Now that your mind has learned to rest on a single thread, returning again and again without force, the spiral of anxiety begins to loosen in a very different way. Not because you've overpowered it, but because you've shown it you no longer fear its movement. And from that steadiness, a softer question rises. What if the way to calm isn't to fix the mind at all, but to warm the body, not by reason, but by kindness, not through thought, but through a shift in presence so subtle it often goes unnoticed. A smile, not just on the face, but in the breath, the chest, the space behind the eyes. The ancient Buddhists understood something modern psychology has only recently begun to confirm, that the body can lead the mind into peace, that warmth and calm don't have to wait for the storm to pass. They can be invited right in the middle of it. Through metta, the practice of loving kindness, and through something so simple it's often dismissed, softness. The smile that doesn't belong to the face is not about happiness. It's not forced. It's not decorative. It's a gentle expression of permission, a gesture of friendliness toward the moment. When the corners of your mouth lift slightly, just enough to shift tension in the jaw, the brain registers it as safety. Muscles begin to release. The breath deepens on its own. The nervous system gets the message. No danger here. This isn't about pretending to feel good. It's about creating the conditions in the body that allow the possibility of calm. Most anxiety patterns are self-reinforcing. Fear tightens the body. The tightness signals threat. The threat activates more fear. But when you gently introduce softness, especially in the face, chest, and shoulders, you interrupt the loop. You don't need to feel peaceful to start softening. The softening itself becomes the message. It becomes the reason. Try this now. Let your face relax. Let your jaw loosen. Let the corners of your lips lift slightly, not as a performance, but as an offering. Notice what shifts. Maybe nothing at first. Maybe resistance. That's okay. Stay with it. Let the body get used to the feeling of not bracing. This smile is what Buddhist monks would practice silently during meditation, not to appear happy, but to rest the face in kindness. Because metta isn't only something you send to others, it begins in how you hold yourself, the tone you take with your breath, the way you sit with your fear. Even when the mind is racing, the body can begin the process of peace. It doesn't wait for understanding. It doesn't need an answer. It just starts to soften. And that softening spreads, like warmth in cold water, like sunlight on still ground. When you practice this kind of physical kindness, you start to notice how much of your inner panic was being amplified by your outer form, how your shoulders were mimicking your stress, how your spine was echoing your doubt, how your hands were holding what wasn't even real. You start to realize that the body had been trying to protect you the whole time, just in the only way it knew how: tension. Metta shows the body a new way, not through correction, but through invitation. A tone of voice inside that says, "It's okay now. You can rest." Not because the world is perfect, but because peace doesn't need perfect conditions. It just needs warmth. This warmth can be practiced with more than just a smile. You can place your hand over your heart, not for comfort, for contact, to remind your body that it's not alone. You can breathe into that space, not imagining light or symbols, but just letting breath and touch meet, letting the nervous system feel something soft instead of something sharp. Over time, you start to use this practice in moments of real panic, when the future feels heavy, when your chest tightens and your thoughts spiral. Instead of trying to reason your way out, you soften. You let the mouth smile gently. You touch the heart. You whisper a few words inwardly, not to fix, but to soothe. May I be safe. May I be steady. May I meet this with kindness. This is not about denying pain. It's about shifting how you meet it. Kindness doesn't erase anxiety. It changes the air around it. It turns a cold room into a warm one. It tells your body, you don't need to fight right now. You can feel without collapsing, and something unexpected happens. The future begins to feel lighter, not because it's certain, but because you've learned that calm doesn't come from certainty. It comes from the way you meet uncertainty. With soft eyes, with loose hands, with a body that isn't trying to flee what's already here. This is where metta extends outward, not just toward yourself, but toward others. You begin to notice how much tension in your life has come from resisting others' emotions, how anxiety rises not just from your pain, but from your struggle to fix the pain of those you love. And this is where loving kindness becomes even more powerful. Because when you extend warmth toward others, especially those who trigger your fear, you stop needing to manage them. You stop needing them to be okay for you to be okay. You simply wish them well. May you find peace. May you be free from fear. May you return to calm. And in that silent wishing, something lifts. Your heart loosens. Your need to control softens. This isn't just spiritual poetry, it's a physiological truth. Metta practice activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It slows the heart. It calms the breath. It reduces inflammation. It brings the body back to baseline, not through effort, but through warmth. The smile that doesn't belong to the face belongs to the heart. It's the body's way of remembering it's allowed to feel safe again. It's allowed to stop rehearsing pain. It's allowed to return to the now, not because everything is resolved, but because this moment is always softer than the one the mind invents. Let yourself practice it often, not just in meditation, but in daily life, while walking, while waiting, while listening. Let the body speak the language of kindness before the mind catches up. Let your posture soften. Let your breath warm. Let your gaze be gentle, even toward difficult moments. This is how you borrow joy, not by forcing it, but by building the conditions for it to visit. Now that the body has learned how to soften before the mind has found a reason, something rare begins to unfold. You no longer wait for the storm to pass to feel safe. You know how to create warmth from within. A smile in the chest, a gentle kindness in the spine, a breath that returns even when thoughts want to run. But even from this softness, one familiar pattern still tries to rise again, the loop of rumination. It starts as a drop, a subtle discomfort, a thought you barely notice. But left unchecked, it grows downward, deeper, heavier, and soon you're swimming through memories, hypotheticals, conversations, questions with no clear end. Rumination doesn't come with warning signs. It disguises itself as useful reflection. It promises clarity, but it offers none. It cycles. It spins. It wears the body down without providing a single new insight. And what makes it so dangerous is how quiet it begins. You don't know you're in it until it's already running, until the drop has already hit the surface and started to pull you under. But what if that drop could fall in the other direction? What if the moment the spiral begins, you could meet it, Not with force, not with avoidance, but with a gentle pivot. A subtle shift, rooted in the very thing the Buddha taught, turning the mind from unwholesome to wholesome. Not with guilt, but with skill. This practice begins with awareness, noticing the moment a thought starts to repeat. It's not the thought itself that's the problem, it's the pattern of returning to it without movement. A thought about the past that brings no new understanding. A fear about the future that loops without release. A question that only leads back to itself. To reverse the flow, you don't suppress the thought. You don't argue with it. You catch it early. And then you ask one simple question. Is this leading me toward clarity or toward confusion? That moment of inquiry stops the automatic path. It introduces space. It asks the mind to be honest. Is this helpful or is this just familiar? This question is not criticism. It's care. It's a pause, a breath between repetition. It gives the mind a chance to choose, and choice is the beginning of freedom. When the answer is that the thought is leading toward confusion, and it often is, you don't need to scold yourself. You pivot. Gently, like water changing direction. You let the thought rest, and then you offer the mind something wholesome, something nourishing, something different. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching on mental cultivation. Replace the unskillful with the skillful, not because the unskillful is evil, but because it leads to suffering, because it pulls energy in a direction that harms. A wholesome thought isn't just a positive affirmation. It's any focus that opens the body, softens the mind, and clarifies the moment. It could be gratitude. It could be compassion. It could be simple presence. It could be asking, "What can I do now?" instead of, "Why did that happen?" One powerful pivot is turning from the question, "What if?" to the statement, "What is?" When you shift into what's actually here, the mind starts to settle. Rumination lives in time that doesn't exist. The present doesn't feed it. So when you return to now, the cycle loses fuel. You can also pivot to service. When the mind starts spinning on the self, on mistakes, on image, on fear, turning your attention outward can break the loop. Not to avoid yourself, but to remember you're not the center of the storm. Helping someone else, even in a small way, interrupts the internal gravity. It allows the thought to release. Another method is movement, not to run from the thought, but to reset the rhythm of the body. A short walk, a stretch, even standing and breathing with awareness. Rumination is often locked in stillness. Letting the body lead helps the mind reverse. Breath also helps you reset. A few conscious inhales through the nose, slow exhales through the mouth. Not deep, just deliberate. Just enough to remind your system that you're not in danger, that there's no need to go deeper into a loop that offers no escape. And if the thought returns, as it often will, you meet it again. You ask again, is this leading me toward clarity or toward confusion? You repeat the process. This is not failure. This is training. The drop will want to fall again. That's habit. But every time you catch it, every time you reverse its flow, you teach the mind a new way, and slowly it learns. You'll begin to notice the early signs of the spiral more quickly. The mental tone, the bodily tension, the pace of the inner voice. you'll catch it before it builds, and the drop will fall upward. It will rise into awareness, into choice, into presence. Over time, the mind begins to prefer clarity. It begins to notice that rumination doesn't soothe, it exhausts, it doesn't solve, it prolongs, and in that noticing, the old habit weakens. The body relaxes, the nervous system stops preparing for pain that doesn't exist. You begin to trust yourself again, not because the thoughts stop, but because they no longer pull you under. You become the one who catches them, the one who chooses, the one who turns them gently toward freedom. And in this turning, anxiety loses one of its most subtle weapons, your own attention working against you. Now, that attention becomes your guide, your compass, your way out. So the next time a thought wants to spiral, pause, breathe, ask. Then choose something lighter, something kinder, something that leads you home. Now that the spiral has been disarmed and the thought has learned to rise instead of fall, something else comes into view. Not another technique, not another tool, but a shift in how you meet the world altogether. Because when you stop reacting, you start to hear, not just the noise outside, but the subtle tone of reality, the space between words, the breath before speech, the calm that lives underneath movement. It's what monks in silence learn not just to notice, but to follow, not to isolate themselves, but to become more deeply attuned. This is not withdrawal, it's the beginning of real connection, one that starts not with talking, but with listening. The silence that can be heard isn't the absence of sound, it's the absence of internal resistance. It's what happens when attention no longer fights reality. When you stop bracing for what you don't want to feel. When you stop filling the moment with your opinion, your defense, your need to control. In this kind of silence, the world keeps speaking, but you no longer react to every word like it's an attack. You hear more, but suffer less. This is the final layer of anxiety that starts to fade, not because you've won against it, but because you're no longer feeding it. Reactivity needs a partner. When you stop dancing with it, it collapses on its own. And in that space, a deeper quiet is revealed, one that listens not just to others, but to the moment itself. The practice begins with one simple shift. Stop answering everything, not out of detachment, but out of discipline. When the body wants to tense, you breathe instead. When the mind wants to label, you observe instead. When the heart wants to shut down, you stay open instead. This is not passive, it's deeply active, because true listening takes more strength than reaction. It takes more presence to hold silence than to fill it. This silence also begins inside your conversations with yourself. When you hear your inner critic rising, you don't need to debate it. You just don't respond. You let it speak. You listen. But you don't add fuel. You don't need to win. You don't need to prove it wrong. You just don't engage. And without your reaction, it fades. This applies to the external world as well. In conflict, in tension, in uncertainty. Most anxiety is born not from what happens, but from how quickly we judge what happens. Something goes wrong, and the mind leaps. We assume, we interpret, we defend. But when you train yourself to pause before reacting, the event loses its sharpness. The space between trigger and response expands, and in that space, you become free. The Buddha called this upekkha, equanimity, a quality of inner balance that doesn't mean indifference. It means clarity, the ability to let things pass through without becoming them. You don't block life, you let it enter, but you don't let it possess you. Listening from silence is also how compassion deepens. When you stop reacting, you begin to understand. You hear what's underneath the words people say, their pain, their fear, their confusion, and you stop needing to fix or argue. You just listen. And listening itself becomes healing, not just for them, but for you. This silence is also where creativity lives. Insight, intuition. It's the pause between efforts, the quiet after release, the stillness that carries all the answers you've been chasing through noise. But it only reveals itself when you stop trying to control the moment. That's why non-reactivity isn't avoidance. It's the most direct form of trust. You trust the moment to unfold. You trust yourself to stay grounded. You trust reality enough not to defend yourself against it. And this trust begins to undo the patterns of anxiety at their core. Try it now. Let something come to mind that usually triggers you. A word, a person, a memory. And instead of bracing, instead of explaining, instead of reacting, just sit. Let the silence be your posture. Let breath be your only statement. Let presence be your only reply. You'll feel the impulse to speak, to label, to fix. Let it rise. Let it pass. You'll see how much reaction was habit, not necessity. And you'll begin to feel a space inside you that no longer moves just because the world does. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you choose when to speak, from stillness, from clarity, from peace. You stop trying to control how others see you. You stop trying to manage every perception. You let the world be noisy, and you let your mind be still. And in this stillness, you become someone new. Not because you've changed, but because you've stopped resisting what was always there. Space, calm, presence, and choice. The silence that can be heard is not something you force. It's something you remember. It's not about escaping life. It's about finally being fully inside it, without the fight. You now know how to stop chasing thoughts, how to breathe in the storm, how to return to the moment with softness, clarity, and steadiness. And as the noise fades, you don't feel emptiness. You feel something else. A fullness, a quiet joy. A knowing that even when the world is loud, you don't have to be. You're not your fear. You're not your past. You're not your thoughts. You are the one who listens. Now rest in that knowing. The journey is not ending here, but for now, let silence hold you. You've just walked through a path that wasn't paved with force, but with presence. A path lined not with solutions, but with silence, breath, and understanding. Each teaching, from the breath beneath the breath to the silence that could be heard, was a soft doorway back to yourself. Not the anxious self built by fear and control, but the one beneath it all. The self that watches without holding, that floats without fighting, that listens instead of reacting. You learned that peace doesn't come from fixing everything, but from no longer needing to. You learned that anxiety isn't a flaw, but a misunderstood signal, and that the mind, when met with compassion and stillness, knows exactly how to let go. From the forest monk who watched storms instead of fearing them, to the drop of rumination that chose to rise instead of spiral, each lesson brought you back to the most powerful truth in Buddhism: that freedom is not found by escaping your experience, but by softening into it. Now, let the breath carry you gently into rest. Let the thoughts pass without needing to chase them. Let this moment hold you, just as it is. If this journey helped ease even a little of your weight tonight, leave a comment below with the words, "I choose calm." I'd love to know which teaching resonated most with your heart. And if you'd like more peaceful guidance like this, make sure to subscribe and tap the bell, because the path continues, and you won't want to miss what's ahead. Sleep well, traveler. The peace is already inside you.